This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
So it is 4 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'm not Glenn. Glenn's texted to say, come on, James, you're making it up now. Shortly before coming on air, it was reported that the Conservative campaigns director, a chap called Tony Lee, took a leave of absence from Party HQ yesterday. This is from a Conservative spokesman. Shortly after it was reported that the Conservative MP being investigated, the second Conservative MP being investigated by the Gambling Commission over possible wagers placed upon the timing of the general election, was married to, wait for it, the Conservative campaigns director. So I couldn't make it up. I wouldn't make it up, would I? I wouldn't, because you wouldn't believe me if I started making this stuff up. You'd say, gosh, that's too implausible. 5 minutes after 10 is the time. But we're not going to talk about that. I don't see how we could, actually. I'd have to remind you of all the candidates standing in all the relevant constituencies every couple of minutes. But I did see a phrase by the actor Stephen McGann earlier on Twitter, who just talked about the spivery of it all. I mean, you know, we're still in the realms of allegation with the second MP. The first MP has apologised for a massive error of judgment, but the phrase spivery works very well, doesn't it? It's the general spiviness of it all. It's so low rent, and yet, Stephen McGann wrote earlier today, we are expected to keep choosing this carnival of grifters over any political alternative forever, because ... It is, I like that spiviness of it. But we're going to do something completely different this morning. I don't know about you. This should be an interesting conversation, all right? It's not an obvious one, but it is a big news story. 2 people have been arrested after Just Stop Oil protesters painted several private jets orange at an airfield where they claim that Taylor Swift's jet had landed just hours before. As far as we have managed to establish, Taylor Swift's jet is not there. But this, of course, follows fast upon yesterday's attack, if that's the correct word to use, and I think it probably is. Yesterday's attack on Stonehenge, where a protester or 2 protesters with a sort of, I suppose it looked a bit like a fire extinguisher. Did it look like a fire extinguisher that was spewing orange powder as opposed to fire putting out materials? And something quite strange happened to me. I'm not a passionate supporter of Just Stop Oil, but I haven't really given it a great deal of thought since they stopped stopping traffic. Well, let me explain. For reasons that I don't fully understand, I've realised in the last hour that I get more annoyed about protests that target inanimate objects than I do about protests that target people. I don't know that this is enough for a whole hour, but I don't understand it at all. So when people, and also it made me realise that all of the people who reach for the sort of lazy rhetoric of what about an ambulance that can't get through, when they're protesting against protests that involved inconveniencing people, theoretically they should be all right or more comfortable with attacks upon. Oh, you're complaining about me using the word attack now. What word do you want me to use? What's the verb you use to describe what they did to Stonehenge? All right, 84850 for text. I'll wait. I'll wait. Seriously, I'm not going to sit here getting criticised for using a word like it. What's the? Oh, a splurge gun. That's nice, Karen. It was a bit like a splurge gun. Where have we got it? What am I going to say if not attacked? Painted? You can't say painted because that overlooks the illegality of it or the sort of nature of it. No, I don't mean water. When I said fire putting out materials, I meant like a chemical compound that would emerge from a more traditional assault. Well, assault and attack mean the same thing, Bruce. I'm not going to silence the attack critics by using the word assault. What is the correct verb to use to describe performance? Dispensed? Defaced. Can we go with defaced? Do we like defaced? They defaced Stonehenge. Not strong enough, is it? They deface Stonehenge, it's not strong enough. Targeted? No, because that's not necessarily naughty. Targeting can be good. It's vandalised. Vandalised. Vandalised? Vandalised. We like vandalised. They vandalised Stonehenge. And I found myself emotionally reacting with more, what's the word I'm looking for, strength, than when they actually stopped the traffic in London. Don't get really cross with me, all right? I quite liked it when they stopped the traffic in London. I thought that was a really effective protest. I also thought it was quite brave because they ran the risk of being attacked by members of the public, of course, which happened, unfortunately, but also being slightly manhandled, perhaps, by police. There's a word for it, isn't it? When you go all slack and the police have to, you sort of end up weighing more somehow in real terms, and the police have to manhandle you off the public highway. That's what part of the training is. I like defiled, actually. Jane, defiled is probably even preferable to vandalised, isn't it? They defiled Stonehenge. Does it have to have religious connotations to be defiled, or it has to have some sort of semblance of purity attached to it? I don't know. Anyway, it wasn't angrily defaced. That's from Owen in Highwood. I think you're taking this all a little bit too serious. Desecrated. Like, we could be here all day. Desecrated's nice. Desecrated, defiled, defaced. Desecrated, I'm leaning to at the moment. And I don't know why I found this more offensive than when they actually inconvenience actual human beings. And I think we might start with that question. Why does this form of protest, maybe it doesn't, but if I was to use myself as a case study, if I was to use myself as a guinea pig, why does this form of protest irritate me and hopefully you more than protests that actually inconvenience people and are therefore more meaningful? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. It's a strange question, and it may be that I'm completely weird, but I don't think I am, because the imagery in the front pages and the news coverage is much greater on a national scale than it is when a single street in London is brought to a standstill. So what is going on here? Even Dale Vince was critical of this action yesterday, and Dale Vince has supported Just Stop. I'm a big fan of Dale Vince's, as you know. He was a wonderful guest on Full Disclosure as well, and his not unlike Jeremy Vine in a completely different context this week, demonstrating that if you've got deep enough pockets, you can actually take a stand against some of the madness, not just in the online media, but also in what we would call the traditional media. But even he said, with some caveats about there being much more important things to get cross or worried about than some people blowing orange smoke at Stonehenge. But even he said that he didn't approve of this act. And I want to know why that is. I want to know why you think the assault, attack, the defilement, the defacing, the vandalism of an inanimate object, albeit one with a degree of... well, not a degree, with enormous sort of historical value. There's no lasting damage being done to it. Why does this irritate more? And then the second question, does that make it more or less effective from the point of view of Just Stop Oil's cause? So from a very personal perspective, I don't fully understand why I'm more irritated. I mean, I'm not supportive of this action. My first thought was, you bloody idiots. That was my first thought. That is not my first thought when, a vicar climbs on top of a train or a housewife sits down and super glues herself to the M25. In those contexts, my first thought, because I'm fairly well clued up on the reality of climate change, my first thought is, I'm so grateful that people like you exist, because I haven't managed to get to where you've got to and where you so clearly should be. So my first thought on days like that, when human beings are being put out, are being inconvenienced, are being targeted, my first thought then is good for you, to the protesters. But when to a lesser extent when they throw stuff at a painting, but when they target Stonehenge in the way that they did yesterday, for some reason, I'm really cross about it. I'm really disgusted. And then I double check, and it turns out that, aside from a slight debate over the possible impact on lichen or lichen, however you're supposed to pronounce that word, there is no lasting damage. That possibility aside, there's no lasting damage. The attention has been secured. The front pages are everywhere. Even when we weren't in a general election campaign and desperate to talk about something other than politics for an hour, this would be garnering huge amounts of attention. So on paper, you're thinking to yourself, this has worked really well. And yet, in reality, you're thinking, oh, you silly sausages, that won't have won a single person over to the Just Stop Oil cause. All it has done, I think, is alienate people. So they've been on a journey as well. So that's two questions. Sorry to go around the houses, but I wanted to get it right. Two questions. Why does this offend us more than attacks on humans or the inconveniencing of humans? And the second question, this doesn't work, does it? Some of it works. Where's the line, do you think, between protest that works or protest that is good for the cause? Even if it annoys a lot of people, the central cause is being propelled or promoted versus having the opposite effect, versus actions that actually make support for the cause less likely. If you hit the numbers now, you will get through. It's 10:15, 0345 6060 973. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's Thursday, so Mystery Hour on the way at 12. 2 weeks out from the general election, 2 weeks today. And normally you'd be saying it's all to play for, but the only conversation I can see at the moment is how big is the defeat for the Tories going to be? And that's the way the language is couched, isn't it? How big is the defeat for the Tories going to be, not how big is the Labour victory going to be. But in the next hour of the programme, we'll also be looking at the report today that 1/3 of young people have decided that they don't want to have children. And that is arguably the biggest story of the year.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 18 minutes after 10. This is really interesting, actually, from a regular correspondent, Emma, who is very, very, very much on the same side of the argument as Just Stop Oil. And they write, it was an attack on Stonehenge. I'm now invested in the idea that Just Stop Oil has been infiltrated by people who want the public to hate environmental protesters. You don't touch archaeology, not even with corn flour, which, of course, flour plus water equals glue. They are morons and annoying the exact population most minded to support their cause. They go on, I'm now waiting for them to target churches, synagogues, mosques, the 7/7 memorials and other grave markers. I'm not going to abandon the cause of environmentalism, but Just Stop Oil are dead to me. It's irritating because it's empty-headed vandalism against a delicate ecosystem that has endured human attentions for thousands of years. It's an unintelligent action against a symbol of scientific discovery. It's the Romans deforesting oak groves. It's Napoleon using the Sphinx for cannon practice. It's the US driving tanks over the hanging gardens of Babylon. It's rubbish behaviour from people who claim to be caretakers. And luckily, they've annoyed pagans at the exact height of the year, which means they'll get threefold back upon them. That's a beautiful illustration of knowledge of pagan doctrines. You get what you give, and good flipping luck to them, because they'll need it. And that is a much better articulation than anything I could manage about Just Stop Oil achieving the polar opposite of what they intended to with this protest. And as someone who quite likes it when they bring streets to a standstill, I'm trying to work out what exactly has gone wrong here. Tim's in Croydon. Tim, what do you think?
Hi, James. Good morning. I'm not sure what about this topic has sort of caused me to ring in for the first time ever.
But that's an answer to the question, or at least that's a concord with me, isn't it? Is that you are surprised by the strength of your feelings.
There is something deep inside, and I think, I don't know, I was going to ask you, did you have the same reaction to the Mona Lisa being...
Not quite. I am, the thing that I'm most puzzled by is why I've got more emotional investment in inanimate objects than I do in human beings. So when human beings are inconvenienced, I quite like the protest, but when inanimate objects are targeted in this way, I don't. But no, I felt something much more visceral about Stonehenge than I did even about Mona Lisa.
Yeah. I think the reason why, I think it's sort of, this philosophical value of art.
Yes.
Or value of these objects, because at the end of the day, Stonehenge is a rock.
Yes.
And we shouldn't be that upset about paint on a rock, but the Stonehenge represents something far more important almost than humanity itself, or maybe not humanity itself, but at least a couple of humans delayed on their commute. Not to mention, obviously, the actual vandalism is probably a more criminal and more maybe heinous act than just annoying people or frustrating people in traffic.
I don't know, technically. I mean, just super gluing yourself to a road is probably quite a serious offence. People have been jailed for climbing on bridges, haven't they? So I think in criminal terms, it's probably not as serious. But
it might actually cause more harm, yeah.
In social
it could cause more harm,
I don't know what the word is. It's a funny one. And what does it do to your needle with regard to supporting or not supporting the cause? You can't abandon the cause because of the behaviour of some fellow travellers. Yeah. But I think Just Stop Oil are now doing more harm to the cause than good.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think they know what they're doing, and they're obviously very clever at what they're doing. They literally want this kind of coverage and outrage, and they know how to sort of annoy people. I don't know about the conspiracy theories about how it's actually, meant to dissuade people from supporting environmentalism.
Like a psyop. I don't know if it's I mean, it does happen. I mean, there are recorded cases of it, but yeah, you'd need a little bit more evidence before you went down that road, I think.
Yeah, where I think it sort of leaves me is that I just have to separate the two. I sort of I treat them as extremists, and I think they don't represent the sort of true path of where we're meant to.
And yet when they were disrupting traffic or climbing up bridges, they did seem, to me at least, to be doing good work. There's a very interesting American on Twitter who I've not come across before, called James Medlock, and he wrote something a while ago that is really pertinent to everything that we've heard on the programme so far today. He wrote, "People may differ on optimal protest tactics, but I think a good rule of thumb is that you should behave in a manner that is clearly distinguishable from the way that paid plants from your adversaries would act in an effort to discredit you." And I really think, looking at the images from yesterday, that is precisely what paid plants who'd infiltrated Just Stop Oil would do if they were trying to discredit the organisation that they'd infiltrated. And yes, it does sound a bit like a conspiracy theory, and we don't really do conspiracy theories on this programme. Nigel Farage yesterday promised to withdraw Britain from the World Economic Forum in the event of Reform, the limited company known as Reform becoming a government. And if you want to know what conspiracy theories look like, have a look at some of the responses to that, or indeed to people like me pointing out we can't withdraw our membership of the World Economic Forum because Britain is not a member of the World Economic Forum. In fact, no countries in the world are members of the Economic Forum, but he knows exactly who he's appealing to with those sort of lies or nonsenses, and conspiracy theories barely covers it. But on this one, I love that line. You behave in a way that is distinguishable from how paid plants would behave in an attempt to discredit your organisation. Richard is in Cirencester. Richard, what would you like to say?
I'm with the other caller, basically. I mean, I was neutral on the Stop Oil concept. If they interrupt people's travelling to work, it's no danger. We were lucky enough to go to Stonehenge and have a guided tour. They do tours every so often with the public. And I had 2 children there. My mother came along. It was a family outing. But we were told, all of us were very strictly told, do not touch the stones in any way. There is, I don't know about the lichen and so forth, but we were told you're not allowed to touch it. And it made a very strong point for that. And I think the fact, I've never phoned up a
radio station
in the past.
In fact, I can tell from your voice you're a little bit surprised to find yourself on air, aren't you, Richard?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Like, darn it, they actually invited me. No, it's just something so passionate and so sort of core. I mean, we're caretakers of the stones. We don't look after them. They're thousands of years old. And yet you look at places around Bristol or any other place where you have exposed stone on the side of hills. You get graffiti, especially near the Clifton Suspension Bridge. You've got drawings up the walls going back hundreds of years, and no one bats an eyelid if someone goes up there and tags it with something else, because it's just, that's what it is.
Sure.
But you're right, there's something about Stonehenge which makes a complete difference. It's something which it just feels so wrong that the Stop Oil, I mean, I've got 2 children, we want to leave something for them which isn't going to be a dead planet. But they've
There's a trade-off between because I in previous issues, previous conversations, previous programs, I would have said, we're talking about it, it's got loads of headlines, it's taking up a huge amount of bandwidth, mission accomplished, it's brilliant. And I thought that was true, but I don't think that's true today, because we're talking about it, it got loads of headlines, it's taking up loads of bandwidth, and I think they've done their cause harm. So there's a tipping point there. And what struck me as weirdest this morning, although it's getting less weird by the minute, the more we think about it, is that you've got more of an emotional investment in an inanimate object than you have in your neighbour's commute, your neighbour's peace of mind, your neighbour's journey to work. But the more we talk about that, the more sense that makes. I
mean, to be somewhat topical right now, it feels like they've done an own goal. You know, they've literally just done more harm than good. It's up there with, I mean, if you stick themselves to a road, the road's not going to care too much. You get resurfaced in a couple of years, you'll never know.
And everyone can jump up and down about it and talk and talk. But it does. It feels, you're right, it does feel like an almighty own goal. Almost feels like a Gerald Ratner moment, and younger listeners can look that up. 27 minutes after 10 is the time, although they may not need to look it up, because I think that coming back early from D-Day for Rishi Sunak was a Gerald Ratner moment, and I think I may have said so at the time, which means you've already looked it up. Elliot is in Eastbourne. Elliot, what would you like to say?
Hey, James. Well, from Eastbourne, sitting on the M25. But yeah.
Just to be clear, you're in traffic. You're not embarking on your own Just Stop Oil protest at the moment.
No, I'm not halfway up the bridge. Don't worry about that.
Go on.
But no, when they were climbing up bridges and stopping traffic, as a van driver who's regularly out on the road of the M25, I've had far more sympathy with them.
Yes.
They do now. And your caller but one, who said he'd never called a radio show before but felt compelled to do so, I'm in exactly the same boat.
How bizarre. That's 3 out of 3 have broken their radio phone-in duck. And all three of you, without managing to be condescending, for which I'm grateful, have managed to convey the sense that you can't quite believe that you phoned a radio station. But such is the depth of your feeling. And, of course, my brilliance at identifying that feeling that we're all sharing this morning.
And my partner, who is a practicing pagan, messaged me yesterday when the news broke and saying that what have they done? Why have they done this? And we spoke about it when I got home. Figure it out.
Yeah.
What was the goal here? What were they trying to achieve? I can understand the
phone line's getting a bit glitchy, which is always a problem. But I mean, the short answer would be front page of the Daily Express, front page of the Daily Mail, front page of the Times. Job done. Everyone's talking about us. So why has that not worked?
Not garnered them any support, surely, because the sort of people that frequent Stonehenge, the sort of place that hold that place
that's part of it as well.
in such esteem,
are
people that would generally sympathise with their cause.
And more. I mean, there'd be absolute early adopters. I thought that was what was so powerful about Emma's message at the top of the show, about alienating precisely the people who have essentially been environmentalists for thousands of years. It's coming up to 10:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. There's quite a lot going on here. I can't remember the last time we had so many calls at the top of a topic from people who... sometimes when one person says something, everybody else says it afterwards as well, like, first-time caller or something like that. But all the calls so far, can't quite believe their feelings are being reflected by the radio to a degree that they've actually phoned in for the very first time. It is 10:30. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, and Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
What does it speak to? There's something about the stuff that's really old, isn't there, that speaks to the strange relationship that we have with mortality. The idea that things can endure long before the span of a human life, long before the span of a single human life, can be strangely reassuring. It can be strangely uplifting in a way to think of that. It staves off the bleakness of our own mortality. And Stonehenge in this country, probably, partly for cultural reasons, partly because of where it is, the fact that you can see it from the road if you're driving into that part of England. There are other henges, there are other stone circles, some of which may be of even greater cultural or archaeological significance. But Stonehenge has assumed that place in the national consciousness. And that phrase from Chris, I think, is absolutely beautiful. The tendrils reaching from Stonehenge into all of our feelings. And Emma is in Sussex. I've never contacted any radio station before, but I found all this incredibly upsetting. As a pagan, I appreciate the underlying cause of Just Stop Oil, as environmental issues are of great concern and felt deeply by many of us. But these sites, particularly the numerous stone circles and ancient burial sites across the UK, are inextricably linked to our connection to our ancestors. I should have read this earlier. You're putting it much better than I did, Emma. Sorry. Places of reflection and connection. So to desecrate these sites is incredibly hurtful. Many pagans view these sites as our churches. And so to act in this way is the height of disrespect and the cause of great sadness. This really isn't the way to, quotes, bring the people with you for their cause. And a few people, Nick is currently at the top of my inbox, reminding us of the destruction or the chopping down of the Sycamore Gap tree on Hadrian's Wall, which felt like an affront to something much deeper than stopping traffic or disrupting commuters, although it doesn't have the pagan connotations that Stonehenge has. It does also speak to that sort of I know I'm sounding a bit pompous, not pompous, a bit airy-fairy, but I mean it. It's not pretentious if you mean it. It's only pretentious if you're pretending. It speaks to the sort of transcending of the quotidian, of mere mortality, and that's why this is such an epic mistake. I think such a huge mistake. 10:35 is the time. Hey, look, we're having a bit of a love fest, but you're more than welcome to disagree with the central thrust of this conversation. Matthew is in Manchester. Matthew, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Also a first-time caller.
Welcome. Let's see if we can get all the way to 11 o'clock without speaking to anybody for the second time. But anyway, carry on.
I was just thinking about, I don't know if you know how many pieces of art the suffragettes destroyed.
Destroyed or damaged? Did they actually destroy?
Well, damaged. Admittedly destroyed and damaged to different things. But they slashed sort of pieces of art. I mean, they used to blow stuff up. And I guess I'm thinking, no one looks back at the suffragette movement and says, was it worth it for women's suffrage?
I don't know why. Hang on. I don't know why, and it may be. I don't know. I might be misremembering this, but for some reason the words "Rokeby Venus" are in my mind when you talk about the suffragettes targeting art.
I'll be honest. I googled it, and I've got Toilet of Venus.
Oh, have you?
I was baffled.
Maybe I've got it wrong. Rokeby Venus. I think there was a famous statue, probably named after some Brit who discovered it, nicked it and brought it back to Britain. So it's often what goes like the Elgin marbles. But the Rokeby Venus, a painting that she cut. I don't know. But anyway, they did do it. You're right. And your point therefore is, well, we got over that, so we'll probably get over this as well.
I guess when we're sort of talking about as climate change is the end of the world and sort of people are going, we probably should do something about it, but we don't want to sort of raise taxes or anything. And it does feel like sort of people are running around going, why won't everyone wake up? And it's like, I don't know if they are trying to recruit people to the cause necessarily, but they are saying this is really important. I don't know whether I agree with it even, but I guess I'm just like, does the cause justify the means? Because we almost look back, when we look back on something like the women's suffrage, we sort of go, we'll forgive all the bombings and even like when they killed people.
Yeah, but I don't think that and oddly, I've just Googled it as well, and we are talking about the same painting. I think the official title is The Toilet of Venus, which, you live and learn, don't you, hey? I don't know that those particular acts are seen historically as having facilitated or accelerated universal suffrage. The attacking the paintings, it has been argued that did not really achieve the final goal. But it's hard to separate the two because the final goal was achieved and these things happened on the way towards that final goal. So you didn't feel yesterday the sort of visceral offence that other callers have described, or you did?
I didn't feel a visceral offence. But I wasn't like, good on you, I wasn't like, oh, great, they're damaged. I was like, it's difficult because I'm like, it is kind of one of those things that I worry about sometimes. I'm like, how far are we off a militant wing breaking off of like, and I'm definitely disagree with that, but I'm like, I suppose as you see these things getting more and more bolder, at least, it's like, and it is the end, and it feels really odd when it's like, oh, what are they trying to stop? The end of the world, basically. It's like...
So, and that is their frustration, isn't it? Is that their cause is so obviously noble and urgent, and the problem is so obviously the fact that so many don't understand that or deny that or live in or deluded about that or just do that thing in the Leonardo DiCaprio film. They just don't look up. They just don't worry about it. That entire film was an analogy for the climate crisis, as you know, and that pushes them to ever more extreme actions. But I felt that we'd reached the point yesterday, where those actions had become too extreme for people minded to support them. And you know, whether you are a pagan or not, the reverence that we feel towards these ancient stones has been offended. It is a really odd thing. Thank you, Matthew. Dale Vince, I told you he'd commented, partly, I think, because Rishi Sunak asked him to personally, sort of singled him out for criticism. So he wrote, I don't support what Just Stop Oil did today. It's that simple. And then added, but there are far worse actions we could be focusing on, far more harmful ones, like pushing 2 million children and their families into poverty, which is what Sunak and the Conservatives have done with their 2-child cap on benefits. I suppose in the interest of political balance, I should point out that the Labour Party are currently not intending to change that policy, something Keir Starmer's been asked about quite a lot. Deborah's in Liverpool. Deborah, what do you think?
Well, for once in my life, James, I disagree with you.
Thank God for that. Thank goodness for that, Deborah.
The last conversation we had was about pushing, clenching around childbirth. So I hope this one goes. I hope this one goes as well.
It's been a while. But you've broken my show, though, because we were going to do first-time callers only all the way to 11 o'clock. And
do you want me to hang up then?
No, it's all right. You're here now. On you go.
Oh, all right. Oh, okay. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I've checked on the BBC website, and it's done no lasting harm to Stonehenge.
No.
I'm not an environmentalist sort of activist in any way. The nearest I get to that is sticking my plastic bottles in the right bin.
Yes.
But I just think it's the pictures of it on the TV were absolutely brilliant.
Gosh.
And in a way, so when stuff happens in London, which I don't give a particular...
Of course.
I've got a thing against London and Manchester because I come from Liverpool. But anyway...
what are you rebelling against? What have you got? What have you got?
Yeah.
Carry on.
I usually say bloody London, bloody Manchester.
Yes, I hear a lot of that. But anyway, on we go.
Yeah. Anyway.
But this one has worked. This one has landed with you.
It has. So, you know, the more the merrier that they stop traffic in London. I don't give a what's it. But this one, gosh, the images were absolutely superb. It's done, and I know people say about the lichen, and if it had rained, it would have perhaps caused problems. But I would have hoped that they would have had a look at the weather forecast before doing this spraying thing that they did. It caused no harm, and what an image! I'm
glad you were listening today.
Absolutely bowled over.
I'm glad you were listening today because we needed a little bit of balance, and I can see what you mean. And I mean, the spectacle is probably the word we're looking for, isn't it? The spectacle.
That is it. The spectacle.
Yeah,
it was superb. I listen to radio more than I watch the telly.
Yeah, very
occasionally, and particularly you, darling.
Oh well, thank you.
But anyway, so the sound was turned down last night, and all I saw was this image. Blinking heck. And when you think about humanity, it links to, us as a species going back 5,000 years.
Yes.
And potentially us as a species not going forward 5,000 years. I think it's just brilliant.
I hadn't thought of it like that. To be clear, though, in conclusion, it hasn't pushed you to a place where you're going to be even more environmentally conscious. You're not going to go beyond your plastic bottle recycling or go on the Just Stop Oil training course and learn how to make yourself go all floppy in the middle of the road.
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I haven't got grandchildren yet. So, and that's a hint to my kids.
Well,
but
that's
anyway,
the next topic, Deborah. Would you believe? The next hour is young people deciding not to have children. Let's hope that doesn't include yours.
Yeah. So when I have grandchildren, maybe I'll have a different view. My son will not have grandchildren because he doesn't want to bring it into this world. So
and there you go. You've knitted together the two topics of conversation quite perfectly. Louise agrees with you as well. It's the best Just Stop Oil prospect ever. It's coming up to 11:15. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And, of course, today is the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. It's a different length depending on the latitude of where you are. So the amount of sunlight and on a planetary scale, because we don't spin on a vertical axis, we spin on it's like Mystery Hour this now, we spin on a tilted axis, which means that the amount of sunlight reaching different regions of the Earth changes during the year as the Earth orbits the sun. And today here, for the northern half of the Earth, the summer solstice is today, when we are most tilted towards the sun. The sun will be directly overhead of us at the Tropic of Cancer. So that's exciting. It's 10:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:48 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I mean, I think the right decision today to steer away from politics, but you could almost have predicted that an extraordinary story would drop and then develop, just as I made the decision today to steer us into slightly less political territory. But it's now been confirmed by the Conservative central headquarters that the head of campaigns for the Conservative Party has taken a leave of absence a fortnight ahead of a national ballot because his wife is being investigated by the Gambling Commission over bets placed on the date of the general election. So we'll probably catch up with Natasha about that later, but I want more of your calls on this first. Imad is in Epsom. Imad, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, good morning, James.
Hello.
I hadn't heard about this news story up until I put on the radio this morning, basically.
Okay.
And my first thoughts went back to Iraq and ISIS, to be honest.
Good grief, yes.
There was a period where they were blowing up historical sites, artifacts, literally whole kind of archaeological sites.
Yes.
Dating back long before the Romans, quite early ones as well as relatively new ones. And even back then, my gut instinct was always, it kind of speaks to something in your core. These places that have survived thousands of years and who knows how long they'll last a bit longer for the next generation. It just resonates with something deep in your core, to be honest.
And you know, and I know that the damage or the actions at Stonehenge were not destructive. The stones will be back to normal by now.
If they started with this,
yes.
Will they try something a bit further next time?
Well, no, I was thinking more. I was thinking more that we don't control our initial emotional reaction, and to see them under threat in this way, to see them being defaced in this way, does fit into the same emotional framework. Yeah, exactly.
That it's completely off limits. Places of this kind, as far as I'm concerned, should be an absolute red line. Like you said, without giving them ideas, basically, there are a lot of places you can put smoke that can do a lot more damage and get you bigger headlines potentially than this.
Yes.
But the touching places of this kind in any way, shape or form, as far as I'm concerned, is an absolute red line.
And yet the last caller was very powerful with the idea that precisely because it has been here for 5,000 years, it has a resonance in the context of a warning that if we don't change course, we will not be here for the next 500 years, arguably. So in some ways, what you describe as the grounds for a particular offence could be the grounds for a particular relevance or a particular pertinence for this monument.
While I can understand her position, it still remains, as far as I'm concerned, it would be a bit of a red line. There are better ways to do it than to go after these kinds of locations.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as you say, you can respect each other's positions. I'm much, much closer to yours, albeit with a side order of pause for thought. Imad, thank you. And yeah, there is something. It's Philistinic, if that's a word. Philistinian? It's Philistine behaviour when the ancients come under any form of attack. And yes, I stress again, everybody knows, including Imad and me, that the quotes, damage, end quotes, to Stonehenge is very quickly remedied with some concern about lichen. But that initial moment of assault upon the artefact, the assault upon the site, does I think speak to similar principles, similar instincts. Paul's in Willesden Green. Paul, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi James. Thanks for having me on. Well, I'm a retired police detective with the Met, so everything I've done is about risk to life. So when I see something like this, it's shocking, it's outrageous.
Oh, it's a terrible phone line. What have you done since you spoke to the producer? Because I really want to hear this angle, this perspective, but the phone line's all over the place, Paul. Oh, it's just got worse. No, you try and fix that up. I'd like to get you on before the end. Meanwhile, Tim's in Rayleigh. Tim, what would you like to say?
Yeah, good morning. It's been fascinating, actually, the last 15 minutes listening to some of the things you said, because I was phoning in really to hopefully bring a little bit of balance to all of this.
Yes.
I work in heritage. I've worked at Stonehenge on a number of occasions.
Oh, yeah.
Firstly, it's worth pointing out that, yes, it's quite a special place. If you walk amongst the stones, especially if you're lucky enough to walk amongst the stones by yourself and you can be taken in by the grandeur of it all, it's quite spectacular. I have to choose my words very carefully because I don't want to upset various people I know when it comes to their kind of like religious beliefs and bits and pieces. But Stonehenge predates paganism in any form, and everything that happens there on the solstice
I can tell now. I just got the sniff in my nostrils of you kicking off some almighty argument that I have absolutely no qualifications to conduct. You just waded right in there, didn't you? And you've upset the pagan community of listeners to this program.
I'm trying not to do.
Well, it's too late now. You could have bloody warned me, Tim. Honestly. All right, carry on then. In for a penny.
My thing is the yes, as you've already said in the last little while, when I watched this yesterday, first thing, my first instinct was, oh my word, look at that. That's incredible. That's nuts. And I was boiling mad because I work all over the country in historical sites, and I love them. I love every single one for different reasons. It's because it's what I do. But actually, in the last 10 minutes, you pointed out, and I've enjoyed a couple of your other callers, those stones have been there for 5,000, 3,000, 4,000 years. Yeah. They will be there for another 4,000 or 5,000 years. No damage was really done yesterday. More damage was done in the 1930s by the Ministry of Works putting them back together. There are amazing photographs of them, of bits of rock being picked up by cranes and plonked on the top.
I've seen that. That's absolute madness, isn't it?
And because there are memes online of setting the clock forward or back at Stonehenge, because so this place is a special place. It is visited by tens of thousands of people, around 10,000 people every single day. Most of them don't go there and appreciate the grandeur. They're there on a tourist trail. They walk around the outside.
Yes, they get a whiff of the grandeur. Yeah. So what about briefly? Because I want to squeeze Paul in before the end.
Yeah.
What about the Just Stop Oil cause in the context?
I don't think they've done themselves any favours because of, like you said earlier in the show, and a lot of the kind of people who venerate and worship at Stonehenge. Good luck to them. They are likely to be Just Stop Oil supporters.
Too late now. So got it, but not this. And that's the thing, isn't it, about not being binary or not being a victim of footballification. You can approve of the cause, but it doesn't mean you have to approve of every single thing that is done by people who are on the same team as you. Tim, thank you. And back to Paul, retired cop. What was the angle that your past as a detective brought to this conversation, Paul?
Yeah, I hope this is better.
Perfect.
It's just the fact that whenever I see something like this, and I've been working with Extinction Rebellion for 5 years, so there's in many different types of action, and it's really tough to choose an action that is going to get purchase and get some traction, but doesn't cause harm. So I look at actions for do they cause harm or not, and this one doesn't actually cross the boundary of criminal damage, really, because it was temporary and minor, and it was part of a protest. So it's very unlikely to go anywhere. I think it was brilliant. It was offensive. It caused outrage, obviously, but we have to look at what we hold.
The phone, and there goes the phone. To be fair, you made the point pretty powerfully, and in some ways, that's at the heart of the whole conversation, because it does, as you say, it fits the harm to life criteria. It prevents permanent damage. All of the things that you would objectively think made it a protest that people would approve of have been fulfilled. All of those criteria have been met, and yet the entire hour, as you've heard, and I know you have, the entire hour has been examining the strangeness of the reaction, and I think it actually is precisely because of the kind of box-ticking exercise that you've described, being a conversation that takes place in the realms of the entirely rational, and Stonehenge as a monument and also as a word, as a concept, as a phenomenon, speaks to something that goes beyond the rational for many British people. It goes deeper, and that's why it looks to me like a massive misjudgment, and yet to you like a really strong intervention, because it did no major damage, if any, and it caused huge outrage, and it drew huge amounts of attention, and there was no danger to anybody's life, either the protesters or members of the public, which is weird, because we're back where we started, wondering why it is so many so offensive. Io is in Romford with the last word on this. What's it going to be, Io?
Hi, James. I disagree with you. At work, we listen to LBC all the time. They call me the Black James O'Brien because I always agree with you. That's why I never call you. I always call Nick.
I like that. Carry on.
But I believe that this protest, I don't see what the big outrage is. The first thing is the damage. There's no damage caused. No one was inconvenienced. Every time they do something in the street and they stop people, it's, ambulance couldn't get through. I had to go and do my appointment again. I had to reschedule. I've been waiting for ages, whatever. We hear all of this all the time.
Yeah, you're right.
On this particular occasion, these people, they've made their point. It's gone all around the world. The pictures have gone there. It's raised the profile. It rains every day in the UK. As soon as it rains, that's all going to go back to normal. Probably rain tomorrow. We'll be back to normal. I can't really see why everybody's getting there.
It's a moral outrage. That's what it is. So you're absolutely right. I'd be the one pointing this out, but on this occasion, I've got completely caught up in it, in the emotion. Yeah. I'm not apologising for it, or indeed retreating from that position. But you're right.
You had a caller a few callers ago who tried to compare them to what happened with ISIS.
Comparing the initial emotional reaction, not comparing the...
All right, fair enough. For me, there's no comparison, because what ISIS were doing, they were intentionally trying to destroy it forever.
Yes.
Essentially, that's what they were trying to do. Just Stop Oil, we're not trying to intentionally destroy it forever. To be honest with you, they've probably done a lot of testing, probably done a lot of consulting, probably thought about it quite hard about what they could do to, like you said, fulfill the criteria of a peaceful protest. This is the UK. This is peaceful protest. Guys,
mission accomplished. Okay, so given all of that, and I'm late for the news, so briefly on this one, given all of that, why has it apparently backfired?
To be honest with you, I don't really know. It hasn't backfired for me. I mean, my initial reaction to us when I saw it was, they're back.
Well, there we go. We've done it. We've done it in 60 minutes. We've covered every single... If this was a dice, that would be the 6. We've got every single face of the die covered on the programme this morning, which is incredibly gratifying. Thank you, Io. A quick apology to Joe, who quite rightly points out the singular of criteria is criterion. I must have misspoke for Joe to pick me up on that. But we end with a joke from Aid, which I would normally steal for myself, but I'm feeling quite generous today. And Aid writes, I'm not shocked to hear of the departure of the Conservatives campaign director taking a leave of absence this morning. I was, however, quite surprised to hear that they had one.
James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 11 is the time. Some big news from the Supreme Court, actually, very pertinent to the conversation we were having in the last hour, involving the granting of new licences for gas and oil project, and the verdict is exactly what the environmentalists wanted. And any granting of new licenses will have to take into account the greenhouse gas consequences of burning the fuel that is, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not mined, is it? What is it? Secured? Scored? What? Drilled. Drilled's a good word. Well done. And so that, I don't know whether I would have noticed that quite as keenly, whether it would have landed quite as hard if we hadn't just been talking about Just Stop Oil's protest at Stonehenge yesterday. But that is, by any measure, a very important story and will have great impact on the future granting of gas and oil licenses, although Labour, of course, this week recommitted to halting all future oil and gas licenses as well, which, just to knit everything together quite perfectly, which activists from organisations like Just Stop Oil claim was influenced by their extremist road-blocking tactics, is the phrase that the Daily Mail uses to describe that. And oddly, it is to the Daily Mail that we turn for our next story, because I haven't seen this research anywhere else. It's a story about the plummeting birth rate. The Mail being the Mail, they look at the whole of Europe and serve it up in incredibly apocalyptic terms. But, you know, you need a nugget of reality to build any theory of the apocalypse. And the birth rate across the whole of Europe is quite spectacularly low. You look at the birth rates for 2022 and you accept the received wisdom that a stable population needs a birth rate of 2.1 babies per woman. How many European countries do you think reach that birth rate? How many European countries do you think have women having an average of 2.1 babies each? Go on, have a guess. How many do you think? No, lower? None. Not one country in Europe has a birth rate where women are having 2.1 babies each or on average. We are in the UK roughly in the middle of the problem. We're on 1.49, which is at the upper end of the third of 6 categories. Ireland is slightly higher than us. Places like Spain are even lower. Spain is unique actually in being in the absolute lowest category. I wonder why that would be. Can't just because of expats moving there, can it? And what this means, of course, is pertinent to the conversation about immigration, although, of course, given that the loudest voices in that debate remain racist liars, so no one's going to point out the necessity of high immigration in a country with plunging birth rates and deep demographic problems on the horizon. But the other bit of the story that really stopped me in my tracks was an observation unique to Britain, where it is claimed a third of young Britons say that they don't want children. We had a caller earlier in Liverpool who described her own son as having decided that he doesn't want to bring children into this world. I mean, to be clear, it's not unique to Europe. There will only be 6 countries where the replacement rate will be above 2.1 by the end of the century, according to this report. And those 6 countries are Samoa, Somalia, Tonga, Niger, Chad, and Tajikistan. So make of that what you will. But you can't argue with these sort of numbers, and you can't argue with the direction of traffic, and you can't argue with people who tell you that they don't want to have children. Or can you? Because I've got friends in their 20s who are reaching or have reached the conclusion that they don't want to have children. And it's 9 minutes after 11, and I'm walking on eggshells now because I can't believe that. I don't like the way that society has, in many ways, demonised the childless, particularly childless women. We've had conversations in the past about what that experience is like and how you are treated in a society where motherhood, where womanhood has really only been valued in a patriarchy when it becomes motherhood. And so in some ways, we should welcome the news that pressure, those social pressures, have relaxed sufficiently for young women to turn around and say they are comfortable in their decision that they don't want children. But I don't know how objective you can be on an issue like this. As we did, I've told you, but not for a while. So if you're relatively new to the program, you may not know this, but we looked down that barrel of childlessness. But we had fertility treatment, no guarantee it would work. The success rate is low. Adoption is a completely different prospect from what it was when I was adopted in 1972. So once you've got that desire, once that flame inside you has ignited the desire to be a parent, I think you lose the ability almost to understand how anybody else could feel differently. So when I read that a third of young people don't want to have children, I automatically think two things. Number one, they'll soon change their mind. And number two, right, I can talk you round. I can convince you to change your mind. And those are really odd responses to something that is a consequence of absolute freedom. It's absolutely your right to decide that you don't want to have a child. And then I think of the grandparents. Then I think of the putative grandparents and the difficulty, because this may come to me, who knows what my children decide to do in the future, but the difficulty of taking your attitudes and your sensibilities as someone born in the 70s or the 60s, or I suppose the 80s, and presuming that your children would do what you did and get on what I think of usually as a conveyor belt of life. Some of the decisions are sort of made from the cradle, that you will do this, you will do that, and you will do this. And having children has, for adults, for centuries, been very much and almost, or at least wanting to have children, is almost a given, almost an inevitability. And yet for your child's generation, that is not true. And it must be a really hard bridge to cross, to get your head around why your child doesn't feel almost in their bones this deep desire to have a parent, to become a parent that you had when you were young. But then logic kicks in and you know that you're wrong. You know that this is a perfectly rational reaction to the state of the planet or to the future of the universe. But rational and emotion, as we discussed a bit in the last hour, rarely settle together, do they? They don't make very comfortable bedfellows. So why have you decided not to have children? And you're quite right. I must try to say child-free. Child-free, not childless. Childless sounds judgmental, doesn't it? It sounds sententious. I say childless, it sounds like a curse. It sounds like something that's been inflicted upon you. It's like saying moneyless or jobless. It's child-free. That could change the rhetoric of the unemployment debate, couldn't it? If we start describing people who aren't working as being job-free rather than jobless, it's a completely different emotional proposition. But And listen, I mean, Claire says my 23-year-old son isn't bothered about having children. But at 23, I don't think you've decided for sure. I mean, look, even at 33, you might not have decided for sure. But the more confident you are in your situation, the more certain you are in your decision, the more pertinent you will be to the conversation that I want to have. So 13 minutes after 11 is the time. And I am going to ask the second question, even though I'm aware of potential embarrassment. The first question is, why have you decided that you do not want to have children? You do not want to be a parent, okay? And I know it's a tricky conversation, but we'll handle it sensitively, I promise. 0345 6060 973. And the second question, is it appropriate to try to talk people round on this issue? I don't know if you were listening years ago when we used to talk about marriage quite a lot. I used to get on my high horse about marriage a lot, in quite an obnoxious way sometimes. But when people rang me to tell me that they didn't want to be married, particularly women, I did not believe them. And I would chip away and argue to the point where I thought I would be able to get any woman to admit that deep down she really did want to be married to her long-term partner, and she'd been sort of gaslit into a position of thinking that it was just a bit of paper or that it didn't really matter. And in retrospect, I don't know whether that was appropriate behaviour or not. It often worked. I have to be honest with you. But not always. And of course, I've got all the power on the radio, so it's possible I was browbeating people into an admission that ideally, they would rather be married than not. But do you, as a wannabe grandparent, do you feel that you can try to talk your daughter round when your daughter? Because I do want both sides of this conversation. What's it like when your daughter says to you, "I don't want to have children," or your son says, "I don't think you're ever going to be a grandma"? Am I imagining that it's much worse than the reality actually is? Do you perhaps understand better than I do the reasoning behind what seems to me to be such an apocalyptic decision? And what do we feel together? What do we feel about the concept of trying to talk someone out of it? Trying to talk someone you care for. Even if it's a mate, it doesn't have to be your own child. You're trying to talk someone you care for out of being child-free. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. It's 11:15.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 16 minutes after 11 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Population collapse seems like a pretty strong word, and economic growth depends upon at least a stable population. I think ideally a growing one, but the altar of economic growth is one where perhaps we've sacrificed enough already. It just stopped me in my tracks this morning when I read in a newspaper headline that a third of young Britons say they don't want children. I want to know why. I want to know what that means in the broader context of family and society, and I also want to know how we feel together about the concept or the prospect of trying to talk somebody out of their decision not to become a parent or not to want to be a parent. We haven't even mentioned cost. We haven't even mentioned cost of living. There's so much here that is pertinent, but no two decisions will be the same. Becky is in Bristol. Becky, what can you tell me? What made you pick up the phone?
Morning, James. Hello. Sorry, this is the first time I've ever spoken to you. I'm quite nervous.
Well, it's the first time I've ever spoken to you. I'm quite nervous.
I really love the fact you're having this open conversation about a new kind of generation looking at family and kind of family dynamics. Me and my partner are both 30.
Right, yes.
We are both good earners, but we're struggling to kind of build a life. So we haven't said 100% no to having children, but we have said if we want to, we've actually now applied to move to Sweden where there's a better setup to have children because we don't feel like it's a viable option in the UK anymore.
So this is quite a thoughtful position then. You've gone in quite deep on what you want your family future to look like, potentially.
Yeah, so I've got a sister who's 13 years older than me, and she's got 3 children.
Right.
And I have... Sorry, I'm really nervous.
Hey, don't be. It's literally only me. Seriously, there's no one listening.
And I have had the privilege of being a part of their lives. Like they're 20, 18 and 17. And as far as I'm aware, they're mine.
Sure.
But I also look at them now and they're struggling.
And the world that they're coming into is, do you know, you see, this is brilliant, Becky. You've already turned my thoughts on their head because in my subconscious, I think because of what the world was like when I was your age, I'm thinking it's quite selfish not to want to have children because you're thinking about the wonderful life you can lead if you're not encumbered by children. But it's the polar opposite. You're actually thinking, is it fair to bring somebody into the world, which as a couple of texters have pointed out, we detail day after day on this programme, the blooming state of the place, don't we?
No, and the second part of your question, it's quite a dramatic situation, and we're blessed no one else goes through this.
Yes.
This conversation came up at Christmas,
right?
And I said, look, I don't know if I want to have children, I don't know when I want to have a career break, there's a lot of issues, and a family member said to me, well, if you don't want children, why don't you get a hysterectomy?
Just straight away,
and was just like, well, your uterus is no use, so why keep it?
What older family member?
Older family member, yeah.
Man or woman?
woman.
I stopped myself saying, I bet it was an older woman that said that, because largely in case I was wrong, Becky, and I'd have sounded like a white freak. But if you'd put 50p on the table, I'd have taken the bet and said it would be an older woman. Partly because, and this obviously wasn't your intention, but if we're generous enough to try to analyse their psychology, if you never questioned your role on this planet to be a parent, particularly a mother, because they do so much more of the parenting historically, then your decision, your freedom, your autonomy, almost, or in her mind, your autonomy offends her, because she's literally never acknowledged the possibility of a different course to follow.
No, and so my sister was a stay-at-home mum,
yes,
and I went to university. We had completely different life trajectories.
Gosh.
But we adore each other. It's minus that kind of flipping of the stay-at-home mum and a university and career. We're really similar.
Yes.
But she also has respect of why I don't want to have a family. But it's sadly from the older generation.
They don't get it. And that's what we've tried to articulate. You've done me a huge favour by bringing in such a strong example. Do you have connections to Sweden?
Nope.
Do you speak any Swedish?
I'm learning.
Are you really? Well, I mean, are you making progress?
It's slow.
Well, good luck with it. But I mean, this is an extraordinary contribution, because it is to Scandinavia, it is to Northern Europe that we normally turn when we look at much more accommodating environments for parenting. And of course, what I do now is I turn immediately to my chart and look at where those countries sit on this issue, and they are not actually delivering particularly higher fertility rates than the UK. Sweden is a little bit higher. Norway and Finland are a little bit lower. Finland quite a lot lower. So even though the environment into which you're bringing a child, Denmark is the highest. Denmark's pretty high. It's not quite the highest. France is in the highest category. France and Italy, both sort of strong Catholic traditions. I don't know if that's got anything to do with it. But we did a thing in Denmark. I've told you this a few times. And we went and lived there for a week or a fortnight and swapped lives with another couple. And the big takeaway for me was the difference in attitudes to parenting at work. So the time that you're given it, each parent gets 2 days a week where they're allowed to leave early to pick up from school and all that kind of thing. There's a huge cultural gulf between the two countries, but perhaps surprisingly, it hasn't delivered a huge demographical gulf between the two birth rates, between the comparative birth rates. Becky, take care. That was a brilliant debut. I hope you call me again. I hope you haven't been traumatised by the experience. Harriet's in Dundee. Harriet, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I'm not sure if I'm a very good caller for this or a very bad caller, because our reasons are multitude.
Well, you've set it up perfectly now. You've built up the tension. The dramatic tension is almost unbearable, Harriet, because we're about to find out, aren't we?
So, climate crisis first and foremost, I think, although from quite an early age, I didn't feel that for children, so I think that has to kind of underlie it. Like with the last caller, my sister has 3 children, and I've just had the honour to be part of their life. So I've got all the benefits of having children in my life without all of the difficulties. Nice. I've seen how hard it's been and how much of a challenge, and financially, that's been a big part of it. I work in human rights, and I really care about my career, and I really care about the people I work with, and up until very recently, it would have been inconceivable to have a child on my income.
Right. That must be a big part of it. And I think my generation struggle with that a bit. You just presume that you're exaggerating, or it can't be that bad. But if you're running out of money, if you're regularly running out of money before you've run out a month, then the idea of an extra mouth to feed is a no-brainer. You just can't do it. You can't go there.
Yeah. And I think there's one more part of it. My closest friend, who I lived with for many years, was fostered, and I've always felt quite strongly that I could be someone that could provide that level of support.
A child that already exists. If you
yes,
like.
Exactly. Yeah, and that links back to the climate crisis again, of course.
Care and nurture could if would be valuable, and doubly valuable. How do people respond? Like family, perhaps parents, when you tell them?
Yeah. So I've got some maybe good news for the previous caller. I didn't catch her age, but she said that she's had a lot of condescension. So now I am 35, almost 36. The "you'll change your mind" has finally stopped. Finally, there's people respect my decision.
That's the obnoxious response, is it? Oh, you'll change your mind.
Yeah.
It's just you'll grow. Because what we're saying, and I sadly include myself in that category, although I'm trying to be better, we're saying, oh, you'll grow out of it. We're infantilizing you, essentially.
Yes. Yeah, and in some sense, it's a fair view to think you'll change your mind when you're 20s, even maybe early 30s. Yes. But the same could be said about having children. You'll change your mind.
Yeah, no, you won't. You won't want them. Seriously, when you've got a proper sniff of adulthood, you'll soon decide that the last thing you want is to give up all of the freedoms that giving up that having children involves. Harriet, perfect. It was a very good call. You'll be relieved to hear.
Thanks, James, and thank you for everything you do. I mentioned you actually to the Vice President of the European Commission, asked me how deeply Brexit affiliations and beliefs went, and I ended up talking about your work to transform minds as a human rights defender yourself. That's who I work with, human rights defenders.
Blimey, thank you. I'm blushing now. It's a good job I'm only on the radio. 26 minutes after 11 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I mean, it's sad in some ways, but the people that we're talking to don't sound sad, so to say that it's sad is quite patronising. Josh is in Storrington in Sussex. Josh, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Nice to speak to you.
Likewise.
You just mentioned about being sad. I'm a little bit sad that I'm not going to be a father. A little bit.
How old are you?
I'm 25, sorry.
And you've made that decision is pretty conclusive, is it, in your mind?
Along with the missus, yeah, she's 29, and she absolutely doesn't want children at all.
Okay.
Obviously, previous callers have mentioned the cost. Yes. Obviously, I don't know if you followed them at all, but I saw a video on Politics Joe that they released, talking to university students about like the price of rent 20 years ago, the cost of a pint 20 years ago, and it's just the mind boggles that the world that my parents brought me up in has changed so drastically cost-wise that I can't provide a good life for a child if I have one.
Even though you've got a decent job and good values and all of the things that we might see as prerequisites of parenthood.
Indeed. Like in a month and a half, not to brag, but in a month and a half, I'll be flying over to Japan to become an English teacher. It's not like I'm ill-equipped to raise a child, or I wouldn't have been 20 years ago.
No.
It's just, and even then, you look at the world that I would bring them into, and would that be a good world to raise them in?
But if everybody thinks like that, there'll be no world left for anybody.
Yeah, I agree. It's just, I don't know. I feel so strong. I feel so strongly after having not the greatest childhood, parent-wise. But no, it's all right. I'm over it.
Sure. Well, we're never over it, Josh. But I know what you mean.
I know it. Yeah. I want to be a good father. But if I have a child, and I've been told that I'd be a good father, I don't believe them. But if I have a child, I would send them to school. Would that be able to provide for them along with like everything that comes with being in school? If something tragic happens, would the NHS be able to handle that extra child? Would they be put on a waiting list for 2 years?
I do know. I'll tell you something weird. And just to clarify, I was very, very lucky parent-wise, but my childhood trauma was all to do with school, not parents. That's why I said the thing about we never get over it. But so you're the first chap on, I think, aren't you? We've spoken to 3 women.
I believe so, yeah.
And I don't know what this means, but you're the one. You're the one that I'm having to resist the urge to try to argue with. So,
you can if you want.
Well, I'm not going to, but if I was going to, I would say something like the very fact that you worry about not being a good parent means that you will be, or that you would be. I can't argue with you about the money stuff, but that consciousness is, to me, quite beautiful.
My response to that is saying
if we were having this argument,
hypothetically,
yes, exactly that, yeah.
Is that while I personally may strike you as someone who would be a good father, would that be enough?
Gosh.
Would I be able to be a good father in this world in the way that they need? Would I be able to support them through tragic circumstances with their health? Would the education that I provide to them be enough? Would I be able to financially support them if things continue the way they are? It's why I'm hoping for the correct result on the 4th of July.
I'll tell you what, Josh. I'm very glad we're not having that argument, because your ducks are in a much neater row than mine are at the moment, which is because you've given it so much thought, haven't you? You've really...
Indeed, yeah. I may only be 25, but it's something that I've been thinking about for a good long while.
Well, thank you. That's an incredibly insightful contribution. Insightful in the sense that you've given me insights that I didn't have before. And I am quite good now, I didn't used to be, at recognising that the world in which Josh is 25 is a completely different world from the one in which I was 25. We all suffer from this. It's you might call it house price syndrome. It's when people of a certain age can't quite believe how hard it is for younger people to get on the housing ladder because it was so easy for them to do it. And they think, well, all you've got to do is work harder or do this or do that. So I am a lot better at that now. And for the first time, probably because he's a bloke and so am I, I'm wondering where I would be at 25. What I would be thinking if I was 25 in 2024. It's 11:31. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
25 to 12. Natasha Clark is with us. We shall catch up shortly with some of the latest developments on the political landscape. First of all, though, I want to make it clear the producer of this programme is passionately opposed to the following feature. She is very, very much of the view that we should not go there and should not do this, because it's time for
Unhinged Headline.
And this, I think, is from The Spectator, and the headline is, from which the producer is absolutely adamant she feels is a huge mistake to broadcast. The headline in The Spectator is "The Mysterious Sex Appeal of Nigel Farage."
Unhinged Headline.
There was an advert posted yesterday, Natasha Clark, by the Conservative Party, which featured a roulette wheel and the attack line, if that's the correct word to use: if you bet on Labour, you can never win. That advert, in the last hour since I came on air, having drawn attention to it online, along with many others, I'm not claiming the responsibility for this, that advert has now been deleted. Why might that be?
Awkward. It's been a fantastic morning to be a Conservative Party official, hasn't it? Yeah. Because this story about potential breaches of the Gambling Act, potential, I should stress, has absolutely blown up this morning. There's been a second Conservative candidate that we found out that's been involved, called Laura Saunders. She's a candidate running in the election. This comes on top of Craig Williams. He is a former aide to the Prime Minister. He was, it was revealed last week, is facing an investigation by the Gambling Commission into whether he put a bet on the date of the election, knowing when Rishi Sunak was going to call it. He placed it just a couple of days before the Prime Minister called that election for July the 4th. And this morning, we've also found out that Laura Saunders' husband is a man called Tony Lee. He is the director of campaigning at the Conservative Party. He has now mysteriously taken a leave of absence this morning after this news was revealed. Now, we don't know whether that's a separate bet or it's the bet related to Laura Saunders. But look, this is a real headache for the Conservative Party. Just 2 weeks out from the election, you're 20 points behind in the polls, and now you've lost your director of campaigning, as two Tory candidates being embroiled in this story.
And a full list of all candidates can be found at lbc.co.uk/candidates. In all the constituencies that you either did or didn't mention.
I didn't.
Did you not? Well, never mind. Better belt and braces, Natasha, belt and braces. I'm gonna make a suggestion that I can't believe it has only just occurred to me. But when we look at the campaign that Rishi Sunak has been conducting, is there not a case to argue that losing his director of campaigns 2 weeks out from polling day could be the best thing that's happened to him in a very long time?
Maybe this guy may have been thinking about what his career might look like following this Conservative campaign. But look, it is a really bad look for the Conservative Party today. They have confirmed that this guy has taken a leave of absence, so is no longer working for the party because of this involvement. It also comes after one of Rishi Sunak's close protection officers as well has been arrested as well, and pending a further investigation from the Met Police about alleged bets as well. Now, that's a slightly separate offence. It would be misconduct in a public office. This is obviously completely different, but all of these completely linked together, and it just doesn't smell right, does it? It doesn't look good.
Well, no, except that caveat that possibly anyone who was involved in the decision to come back from D-Day early, or to talk about not having Sky TV, but no longer being in the tent, may make Rishi Sunak's life a little easier in the coming 2 weeks. There's just a particular apology to Sue, who has responded to that unhinged headline with the line, "Thank you, James, I just regurgitated my overnight oats." What else has been going on this morning?
That is the main thing that I've been looking into. I would like to play you a little clip about what Michael Gove, the Conservative Cabinet Minister, had to say about this gambling story when we asked him a little bit earlier on LBC.
As we learn now that a number of Conservative candidates seem to have placed bets on what day the election would be called, and even a police officer. Are the Tories corrupt as well?
Well, there are two individuals who are Conservative candidates, and one individual who's a police officer who are facing parallel investigations. I can't comment on the detail of the investigation, but what I can say is that it's beyond bad to use information like that to secure an advantage. But, you can't, I think... People will draw their own conclusions, but I don't think you can generalise about a whole party composed of tens of thousands of good citizens and then say that just because two people have been, if they have been, naughty...
What would it say? I hear the if it turns out, if the Prime Minister can't have private conversations without fearing that someone's going to race down to bet victor, it's a bit embarrassing, isn't it?
It's beyond embarrassing. It's wrong. And the other thing is, it's also, the principle here is it's not just a betrayal of trust in the Prime Minister, which is very bad. It also means that other punters are losing out because of inside information, and that means that the system isn't operating fairly.
Was that Gove sniffing, or Nick? Is it hay? It must be hay fever. It's all a very long way away from this, isn't it?
I will work day in and day out to deliver for you. This government will have integrity, professionalism, and accountability at every level. Trust is earned, and I will earn yours.
It's 11:42. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. On we go.
Why haven't these two candidates been suspended? I've asked the Conservative Party.
You are allowed, so they can't get them off the ballot box, off the ballot paper.
They can't get off the ballot paper now. It's now too late for this. But the Liberal Democrats this morning calling for Rishi Sunak to suspend both of these candidates while their investigations are ongoing.
Yes.
Not have a response from Downing Street or from the Conservative Party about why that has not been done. Of course, like I say, they can't replace them. It's too late to do so. But there are questions being asked.
But you can suspend them. I suppose it's white flag territory, is it, if you suspend them? And it's not just the Conservatives, of course, that fail to suspend candidates. A Reform UK candidate has suggested that tinned food could cause gender dysphoria.
Interesting.
Alongside car fumes and the pill, he wrote, "How can we say with certainty that tinned food, car emissions, radio waves, food additives, mercury fillings, or any other..." I thought that said marmalade then, but it says man-made.
Marmalade.
It could easily have said
marmalade.
It could have said marmalade. Isn't causing an increase in gender dysphoria. But I mean, it's so hard to keep track of that lot. Did you see just briefly the story about them not paying £144,000 to a company to vet all their candidates? The limited company known as Reform UK, the chief executive Nigel Farage, they paid £144,000 to an outside company to vet their candidates, but it hasn't happened because the election took everyone by surprise.
Yes, apparently so. And yes, Nigel Farage trying very much to infer that there could potentially have been some form of interference with that investigation.
Surely not a narrative of bogus victimhood built entirely upon nothingness. This is, after all, the man who pledged yesterday to withdraw from the World Economic Forum.
Which I don't think we're a member of, are we, James?
No country on the planet is a member of the World Economic Forum, Natasha, but the conspiracy theorists will continue to gnash their teeth accordingly. Thank you. I can't rule out the possibility you'll be back before 1 o'clock.
I can't either.
Yeah, well, I mean, what could happen now? So when we were talking earlier about the attack on Stonehenge yesterday, the best contribution that I came across was a quote from an American tax expert who's got quite a big following on Twitter, and he said people may differ on optimal protest tactics, but I think a good rule of thumb is that you should behave in a manner that is clearly distinguishable from the way that paid plants from your adversaries would act in an effort to discredit you. And that's where the Conservative campaign is now, is that, I mean, it obviously hasn't happened, but if the Conservative High Command had been infiltrated by individuals dedicated to damaging the Conservative electoral campaign, it wouldn't look that different from how it's looking today.
And, you know, there are questions about where these stories are coming from. Is it coming from somebody inside the Gambling Commission who have obviously been maintaining very silent about exactly what's happening here? Of course, we have no idea. Or is it coming potentially from some sort of blue-on-blue action when you've got Conservatives actively briefing both on and off the record in various papers about how awful the campaign is, how they believe they're going to lose. This is a moment of maximum danger for the campaign, and especially for the Prime Minister, who, like I say, wanted a campaign as he went into Downing Street on an integrity and professionalism in government. And now this story, he might not be very close to it, but it's incredibly embarrassing for him, isn't it?
And it's not over, because some of the language surrounding what the Gambling Commission have said and particularly how the Conservatives have responded, makes it possible that there are more than two people connected to this allegation.
Yes, the Conservatives have updated their statement given to the press, which was talking just about one individual, aka Craig Williams. It's now saying a small number of individuals. So is there more to come, potentially?
Thank you, Natasha. It's 11:46. Mystery Hour, of course, on the way at 12.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:49, and we tear ourselves away from the skip fire of Conservative Party politics and return instead to the, altogether more important question of demographics and plummeting birth rates, which are attributable in large part, particularly in the UK, to the fact that a third of Britons don't want to have children. And I'm examining that this morning with the help of some fantastic callers, but also with a bit of self-awareness as well, because as I said, I think to Josh, I have this impulse to try to argue with you. A good friend of mine would say, we're pretty close now to deciding conclusively, late 20s, we're not going to have children. And I want to go, no, but you'd be a great mum or you'd be a great dad. And it's such a and we sit here smugly saying, oh, it's the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. It's the most important achievement of my life. But you can't do that because you're not walking in other people's shoes. And even more so, given some of the reasons that we've heard, the world that 25-year-olds live in today is not the world that we lived in when we were 25, or that I lived in when I was 25. Emma is in Guildford. Emma, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Yeah, I was very much of the mind growing up that I didn't want to have any children. Now I'm 33 and my husband's 30. We decided last year that we did want to have a baby, and have now got a 6-month-old who's actually 6 months old today.
I can hear.
But, when I was 16, my sister had her first child when she was only 17.
Crikey.
So I think that was what put me on the path of not wanting to have children, as I was looking after my nephew, who's now 18. A lot at the time when I was just a teenager myself.
So your life got turned upside down by a baby at a very early age, and it took for another sort of 14 or 15 years for the dust to settle, as it were. Were there moments? Was it a sort of incremental U-turn, or was it, when it happened, did it happen quite quickly?
I had a conversation with my husband, who we've been together now for 10 years this year.
Yes.
I had a conversation with him very early on saying I didn't want to have children when we got together. But we both sort of, during COVID as well, and now that we've both established careers and stable within ourselves, which I think is the most important thing, to know each other very well,
Yes,
to
of
bring
course.
children into the world, that we decided that we would like to maybe go down the route, and
And here we are. Did
Yeah.
your husband love you so much that he went along with where you were while secretly hoping that you might change your mind, do you think? Or were you very much joined at the hip on this?
No, I think we were both of the same mind. I
Yeah.
think we actually agreed that we both didn't want to have children. So, yeah, I don't think either of us were hiding it or anything like that. Yeah, it just happened at the right time.
I'm so glad. Do you know what I nearly said then? Bearing in mind you've got your 6-month-old baby in your arms at the moment, I nearly said, any regrets?
No, definitely not.
I'm
no.
very glad to hear it, Emma, frankly. And if there were, I don't know that you'd be voicing them on live radio. I just caught myself there. I was just leaning into the microphone to go, any regrets? And I had some jokes to that end, which along the lines, and I had a few along the lines of saying, I really don't want to be a parent, James. My kids are going to be gutted when they find out. And jokes to that effect. Emma, thank you. 11:53 is the time. Gregor is in Kilburney. Gregor, what made you pick up the phone?
Hiya, James.
Hello.
So I'm 29 now, and I think probably when I was in my early 20s was when I decided that I was probably never going to have children. And for me, there are two main sort of sides of it. There's the sort of the rational side and the irrational side.
Yes.
And I think the irrational side for me is, fundamentally what, the desire to have children is all about is evolution, right? It's biology, it's wanting to replicate our own genes.
Yes.
And so if you don't feel that fundamental, biological need, you can't create that out of nothing. And people talk about that all the time. And I've had partners in the past who have talked about that, and I just could never empathize because I just never felt it.
But that isn't part of the zeitgeist, is it?
No, it's not. No,
that would be true. Yes,
that's certainly one side of it for me personally. But
sure.
So I'm an environmentalist, and as far as environmentalists go, I like to think of myself as a relatively optimistic one.
Good.
But
it must be
I
hard.
still can't. It's bloody hard. It's a big part of my work. Communicating this. I'm a filmmaker, and communicating this message in my work is an important thing all the time. But it's really, really hard sometimes. And I genuinely, as optimistic as I am, I can't see a world in which I want to bring another human being into it. With regards to looking at economic or population growth, I'm very much of the mind that unlimited growth is fundamentally unsustainable. Whether it's the economy or whether it's
of course it is. In a planet of finite resources, it's the sort of great myth of our time, isn't it? That you can have
especially
infinite growth.
In the West where we are today, our kind of per capita pollution is absolutely astronomical, and the damage that we have done as a population to our planet is just. I really struggle to reconcile myself with that. But that doesn't mean that having made that rational decision, it doesn't mean that I feel smug about it or better about myself, because I think and I was saying this to your producer on the phone. I owe so much of who I am and my everything that I have in my life. I've had an enormously privileged life, and I owe so much of that to my parents. My mum raised me, as a single parent for a good portion of my childhood. She's an educationalist, and she's given me so much and continues to give me so much and has sacrificed so much for me. And the idea that I'm not going to be paying that forward. I try to find ways in which I
carrying
can
on the line. How does she feel? How does she feel about it? Have you had the conversation?
Yeah, she's well aware of it. I think you mentioned to someone else earlier that there is a sense, among kind of some parents or friends or whatever of the, it's just a phase, you'll get over it, you'll change your mind. And she has always been like that. One of my grandparents is still alive, and I feel bad for her because she always keeps talking about when she's going to see grandkids.
She's going to have a great
grandchild. Yeah.
And that, well, certainly as far as you're concerned, you know that she's not. Gregor, thank you. I'm cracking on only because I want to squeeze in one more call. But I could have listened to you for much longer. And a quick text as well from Matthew, a tweet. As a working class millennial with little to no hope of ever owning a home, being peer pressured into having children for the economy feels cruel. Is our purpose just to create a low paid workforce for the billionaire class? I'd love to say no, but I've been watching too many Gary Stevenson videos, Matthew, at the moment, so I'm not sure that I can. Harry is in Southampton with what will probably be the last word on this. Harry, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Very quickly, I haven't got a lot of time. I just want to, growing up as a just as a normal guy, was always the thought of becoming a dad, and that's just what I always wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I'm in my mid-30s now, and it didn't happen for me for whatever reason, and I've just fallen into another relationship now she has 2 children of her own, and I've had that for the last year, that insight into what that life is actually like, and it's for me, it's truly everything that I thought it would be. It's amazing. It's just made me feel whole, as like a purpose. I feel like the feeling I've got now is exactly how I imagined it to feel. But I just want to say, like, if my relationship was to ever end, for God forbid, because I love my partner so much, and the 2 children, I wouldn't want children of my own. Purely,
why?
I've found the whole thing the last year the most fulfilling thing that I've ever done in my life. But why does
that make you? Because listening to you, that might have flipped you the other way. It might have made you really.
Listen, I thought it would, but when I'm sat on my own and the kids have gone to bed, and I get to think about my day that's just been, and the life that I did lead before I met my family is kind of like, it's just so relentless. Everything is just like financially, obviously, I think the situation with the country at the minute is that I think that might fade away in time, but
So you're talking about circumstances and emotions. I was only hearing the emotions, but what you're describing is the circumstances are such now that you wouldn't have any children of your own because of the grind.
It guts me because I always wanted to be a dad, but I just feel I've done it for the last year, and it's not for me. And I mean that I love the boys so much, and I would hope if it was to ever end, I could always.
Harry, mate, you're knackered, right?
I'm knackered.
You're just knackered. That's all right. So, we've all been there. There's no shame in it. For goodness sake, it's always the first thing you think. I mean, that's when I do like lines sometimes that I really should have grown out of by now. And if someone tells you, a younger colleague says they're about to have a baby, I say, well, make sure you get as much sleep as you can in the next few months, because you won't be getting any at all come February or come December. Thank you. That was lovely, that hour. In fact, we're doing a lot of lovely hours at the moment. There must be something in the water. I'm sure it won't last. And, of course, we got Mystery Hour next, which we didn't have last week because one of those pesky politicians launched a manifesto or something without consulting their calendar and realising that some hours in the current affairs calendar should be sacred. Well, the next one is
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 3 minutes after 12, your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. Now, if you're new to this part of the programme, it's very, very different to all the other parts of the programme, and I usually offer up a guarantee of some laughter. I guarantee that you will laugh out loud between now and 1 o'clock, or you get your money back. But even more than the other parts of the week that we spend together, this is the part where I really, really need your help. I think on some topics you'd probably agree. I occasionally give the impression that I'd be able to wax lyrical for at least an hour, uninterrupted, should the opportunity demand. But not on Mystery Hour. You need to ring in with questions, mysteries, riddles, enigma, to which you have been thus far unable to find any answer or solution. And then someone else rings in with that answer or solution. It sounds pretty simple. You know why it sounds pretty simple? Because it is pretty simple, but somewhere in the margins the magic happens. Somewhere in the margins the magic happens, and if you haven't listened to it before, you hopefully will today find out what I mean by that. Now, if you make my favourite contribution of the week, you will win a Mystery Hour board game. Do you know, for some time people thought that I had made that up, that there was no such thing as a Mystery Hour board game, but there really is, and it is really, really good. You can find out more about it at mysteryhour.co.uk. Indeed, you can buy your own if you're not lucky enough to win one today. And you can see the full terms and conditions for this proper grown-up competition to win a Mystery Hour board game at lbc.co.uk. If you are relatively new to it, the only rule you really need to be aware of is that you're not allowed to look anything up. So if you hear someone ask a question and you think, oh, I know, I'll go and check my Encyclopedia Britannica, or I shall Google it. Don't do that. It defeats the entire object of this exercise in illumination. It's a celebration of education. That's what it's about. I don't take texts or WhatsApps, but as you'll know, if you listen to the programme, neither do I have much respect for the rules that I make up myself. So I certainly will never take a question by text or WhatsApp, but I may allow the occasional comment, and I don't think I'll take answers either. But the only other rule is that we used to have a rule that we never talked about motoring-related issues, but even that, as I've got older, has begun to wither a bit. So, frankly, that is the only rule. Don't look stuff up. Let's crack on. Morris is on Oxford Street. Morris, question or answer?
Questions, please, James.
Carry on.
What I want to know is that when you outside your house or anywhere, and you're holding your Wii, you know, when you get
your Nintendo games console.
When you get nearer your house or something like that, it gets very intense that you can't even hold it for a while to know whether there's any medical reason for it.
Your bladder, yes. Well, I think we know that. Don't we know that? Isn't it your subconscious telling you that you're nearly there now?
Well, nearly at home.
Yeah, so you're nearly at you're nearly at the toilet.
Yeah,
the toilets of Venus.
Any medical reasons for that or something?
So you want someone who sounds like they know what they're talking about to explain it to you.
Yes,
no, that's absolutely reasonable, Morris.
Yeah,
so I mean, everybody does it. I'm just going to have a private conversation, Morris. Will you be okay on your own for a second?
Yeah.
Okay, you wait there a minute. Does it happen to women as well? Okay, yeah. I thought it happens to women as well, you know, Morris. It's not just men.
Yeah, it does.
It does. Yeah. Well, I mean, we couldn't say that with certainty, you or I, could we? But I've checked with one, and it's definitely true. So there you go. We shall find out why. That little relaxation, if you like, that arrives, that settles upon you in the bladder area, having been walking oddly all the way up the road. When you get to your own front door, it becomes almost impossible to hold it in. Thank you very much, Morris. Graham's in Stanmore. Graham, question or answer?
Question, James.
Carry on.
What's so alluring about alliteration?
What's so alluring about alliteration? So you're like me,
use it all
are
the
you?
time.
Yeah, I love it. I don't know why I love it, but I love it. Do you love it?
I do. I love Donald Duck. I love Mickey Mouse. I love Marilyn Monroe, if you get my drift. So there's something about it that really appeals to the psyche, but I've no idea what or why.
There's like a sort of curious congregation of... Oh, I thought I was going to be able to do a good one there, but I've got nothing now. A curious congregation of... That sound like Arkwright now on Open All Hours. So you're thinking that there's some sort of psychological effect on the
absolutely.
Listener
it's
or
kind
speaker.
Of soothing.
Yeah,
it's soothing for some reason. I don't know why. And it's always good to talk to brigands of broadcasting.
I don't know if I'd accept that description, but you're very kind. You're very kind. Thank you, Graham. I'm not. It's oddly, I do it without thinking about it, and now that I'm thinking about it, I'm going to struggle to do it. But the peculiar political paranoia, of course, is a great example of what we're talking about. Why is alliteration impactful? Why does it have a kind of psychological impact on you? 9 minutes after 12 is the time. Kia is in Hackney. Kia, question or answer?
Question, James.
Carry on.
The question is water ever as hard as concrete?
What?
Because my dad always used to say, I used to say to him, if I jump off this bridge into that river...
Oh, you mean at the bottom? I thought I've got images of you lobbing buckets of water and buckets of concrete off a multi-storey car park.
No, and he would say, no, it would be like hitting concrete. And I just wondered if that's actually a true saying, because you get these guys jumping off cliffs and things. How do they know that they're going to survive if they hit that? At what height?
I mean, it's got to have a lot to do with technique, hasn't it? If you manage to go in with with your sort of fingertips. I was looking out, it's funny you say this. I was looking out of a plane window, an aeroplane window on Sunday, coming back from Dublin. And I had exactly that same thought. If you hit that now, if I jumped out of this aeroplane now, obviously without a parachute, and I hit the sea, would it flatten? Would it be like the same as hitting the ground.
Yeah.
Concrete is what misled me. You mean the ground, really?
Yeah,
don't you? So,
yeah.
And I presumed it would be, because you kind of just think that makes sense. But you're right. You do see people jumping from incredibly high heights. And okay, I'll find out. When you phrase it right, is there a height from which hitting water will be the same as hitting a solid surface? Yeah. All right, you're on. We're not going to do anything silly, are you, Keir?
No.
What has it been like? Were you named after Keir Hardie as well?
I was, yeah.
What's it been like to see your name enjoy such a time in the sun in recent years, having been a relative...
As a youngster, I never really liked it because it was unusual.
Yes.
But now it's completely acceptable, as they say.
It is. I was wondering if we could find another Keir Starmer, actually, earlier this morning. I was talking to one of Nick's producers about their brilliant feature where they get two people with the same names as footballers to come on and talk about football. And I thought we could run with that and have our own leaders debate with three people who just share the same names as the leaders of the three main parties. But and the one that I presume would be hardest to find would be Keir Starmer. I imagine there's quite a few Ed Davies around. And I don't know about Rishi Sunak, but Sunak is a surname that I've seen in a few different places, so it would depend on how popular a first name Rishi is. But then I thought, I can't be doing that. I can't scale those dizzy heights. Dave's in Norfolk. Dave, question or answer?
Question, please, sir. Thank you.
Carry on.
When does a boat become a ship?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And also, just like, when does a £250 million yacht become a boat or a ship, or is it always a yacht?
You're only allowed one question, so we could add.
I do understand that.
There may be a distinction that yacht plays into, but the question is, when does a boat become a ship?
Yeah.
Or what is the difference between a boat, a ship, and a yacht? That would be one question as well.
Yeah.
So that works.
Obviously, years ago, the sailing ships were massive.
Yes.
And I remember an old program called the Love Boat, which was on a cruise ship, I believe.
Yes.
But perhaps I just chose the name Love Boat because it sounds nicer, basically.
No, there's a lot going on. It could be just me. Whereabouts in Norfolk are you?
I'm in Rudham at the moment, but I live in Fakenham.
Rudham East Rudham or West Rudham?
East Rudham.
Near the Crown?
Just up the road from the Crown, working, yeah.
Yeah. You don't sound that amazed that I've just asked you where in the county of Norfolk you are, and when you've given me the location, I can name the nearest pub to where you're standing.
Well, I know you like Norfolk, and you visit Norfolk quite often.
Yeah, but it's a big bloody place, Dave. It doesn't mean I'm going to know the pub that was in 200 yards of where you're currently sitting, does it?
Well, I think you probably know every pub in Norfolk.
I was hoping for a little bit more in response to this, Dave, to be honest with you, mate. But anyway, it's a nice pub. It's a nice pub, the Crown.
Yeah,
do you want a bit of a sort of local sightseeing tip or not? Or are you busy?
No, I lived there all my life.
Oh, you know the area really well, do you? I thought you'd done. I thought so. You know that old abandoned church just behind the farm.
Yes.
So you swing that right opposite Tatterset, opposite the Tatterset turn-off. Instead of going left into Tatterset.
Near Broomsthorpe.
Coxford. And then there's a church. You can still ring the bell in that old... it's not abandoned. They do a service there on one Sunday in every month. But it's a pretty magical place. Dave, lovely stuff. I shall get you an answer to your question. Boat, ship, yacht. It's coming up to 12:15. Come on. I mean... It's a big place, Norfolk. One little village. I knew it, and I knew the nearest pub to where he was actually standing. Barry's in Berlin. Barry, question or answer?
Hi, James. There's a question.
Carry on.
Is there a legal limit to how many times one can drive around a roundabout before you become a nuisance?
Before you become a nuisance or before you take off?
Yeah, centrifuge, right?
Exactly that, exactly. Because it is dangerous.
Yeah.
But it's also done in good faith, usually. I mean, that you missed your turn-off, so you go round again.
Yeah, I was watching an Instagram video. It was actually a couple of weeks ago, and I've been trying to get on since.
Yes.
Because as soon as I saw it, I thought, this is a question for you.
Is there a traffic offence involved in deliberate abuse of a roundabout, as it were?
I wouldn't even say deliberate. In this video I saw, just this poor lady was stuck in a roundabout. I think it was in Paris or something like that. Yes. One of these massive 7-lane monstrosities. and she was just stuck there, and the police were waiting patiently on the side till she came out, and she got a ticket. And I thought, what did she do wrong?
What for? What did she get a ticket for? Dangerous driving, maybe? I mean...
Yeah.
All right, you're on. I love that question. Thank you, Barry. I hope we get an answer. And it's a motoring question as well. Oh, my days. It's a motoring question, and I love it. I don't think this has ever happened before. This is the very first time that we've had a motoring question that has delighted me. Oh, my God. What is happening to us? So we've got the question about... which I know we've had it before, but I wasn't going to tell Morris that. It's gone. Why does your bladder relax as you get closer to home when you've been successfully holding in holding it in for, in some cases, a very long time? What is it about alliteration that appeals to us so much, whether we're hearing it or speaking it? When does water become as, if you like, as hard as concrete or as hard as the ground if you're landing on it from a great height? What are the distinctions between boats, ships and yachts? And is there a law governing unreasonable use of a roundabout, i.e. going around it too many times? It's 12:17.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 19 minutes after 12 and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. On we go with Mystery Hour, your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. Jason is in Bushy. Jason, question or answer?
Question, please.
Carry on.
Okay, I want to know how much energy or power is used to save an email on one of those data centers. The reason I ask, I know it's a weird question. The reason I ask is I was at a meeting last year, and someone pointed out that people didn't realise how much energy is used just holding emails. And about 2 weeks ago, I logged onto an old email account, and there was 22,000 spam emails in there. And then I suddenly looked at my other emails, and there's like 4,000 promotions on one.
How did you remember the password from the old one?
I did a reset thing. Well, to be honest, back then I used one password for everything. It was a long time ago. And it just struck me that...
We're talking about storage?
Yeah. Because every email has to be stored in a data center if it's on a cloud.
Have you just made that up? Or is that the right phrase, data center? Or did you just make it? Is. Are you sure? 100% sure? So, so every email is stored in a data center?
Yeah. I mean,
I don't think, one email's not going to be much, is it? But you've got 20,000. So what is the actual question?
Okay, let's say how much of energy or power is wasted storing 1 gigabyte, 1 gig of... or 1 meg of emails.
What's the difference between a gig and a meg?
A gig is 100 times a meg, I think.
Yeah, is it? All right, yeah. So, or maybe a global. Someone will know how much we are using to store all the emails in all the world, in all the data centers.
It was specifically the spam one sort of thing, because if you've got that many, how much energy is being burnt and planted?
And by energy, we mean electrical energy, do we? Yeah. I don't want to. But if it's not on, it's still being stored somewhere, isn't it? Because if you wanted to, so there's data.
Yeah, it's in a centre. You can reach it, and those places have to be cooled all the time with those great big fans, and it costs a fortune.
Carbon emissions. We could do it in terms of carbon emissions. So I mean, how much is it? How much is it? All the email storage.
Yeah,
it's a big one.
How damaging is it to the environment?
Very.
For all that spam to be sitting there.
Very. Next question.
I've listened to all of your everything on. I've listened to every one of the episodes
of Mystery Hour
on Google Player. Yeah.
So you're confident that this has not come up before?
It's never been asked before.
How much energy is used up by listening to every single episode of Mystery Hour on?
That would be another one.
It would be. Let's deal one step at a time, Jason. I should try and find out for you. What's the sort of cost in either financial or energy terms of all the email storage or of email storage, either in general or in particular? It's 12:23. Jack's in Sligo in Ireland. Jack, what would you like to say?
Hiya, James.
Hello, Jack.
I was ringing in connection with the guy who rang about the urgency to wee.
Yes.
I had my prostate out in 2019.
Okay.
And it affects your bladder, amongst other things. I get that urge frequently. The doctor called it a latchkey syndrome. So basically, the closer you get to the toilet, the harder it is to control your bladder. So you get that really, really painful urge, even though you're only feet away from the bathroom.
Why?
Because you're almost there, basically.
It is just the brain associates getting into the house with getting into the toilet.
Yeah, it's a release of tension.
That's what I said. But Maurice, I think, understandably wanted something that sounded more persuasive, and you've given us the sort of technical term, with latchkey syndrome or latchkey incontinence when you get older, actually, I think.
Well, perhaps.
But we're talking about latchkey syndrome. So here I am. Yeah. I get my key out. My brain says to my bladder, relax, lads, you're nearly there.
Yeah, exactly.
So you relax, and a little bit of wee comes out.
And that's the way it happens, yeah.
That's the way it goes. Thank you, Jack. Take care. Have a round of applause for Jack. There we go. I began to forget what that sounds like. Satisfying noise. 24 minutes after 12 is the time. Reese is in Barnsley. Reese, question or answer?
It's a question, please, James.
Carry on, Reese.
Right, I'm going to try to enunciate this a bit better than I did to your producer. The white keys on a piano have a lip overhang the end, project beyond the key.
Yes.
Why would that be there? Because if anything, it's a hindrance, I thought. But
to stop it sinking further into, it has to stop.
No, that's what I thought. But it doesn't actually touch anything. If you hit the key, it sort of stops before it hits that lip. Unless it's a legacy thing.
It's like a windowsill, you mean, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well, so you measure them all up. Or maybe it's, if you think, I'm thinking about this from a craftsman's point of view, Reece.
Well, I'm a craftsman and I've thought about this a lot.
Well, this is how I often approach problems, so you'll understand that. So I would have thought that it's better to slightly overshoot than run the risk of undershooting.
The travel of the key?
The top of the key. Because you're going to cut all of those pieces, aren't you? It's going to look weird if they're a perfect fit. You'll have a visible seam as you look down at the keyboard. Whereas if the lip goes over, if I'm understanding your question correctly, then as you look down at the keyboard from above, it looks completely clean and it feels nicer.
But were they? Well, they were originally solid ivory, or were they not? Were they laminated?
They can't have been solid ivory.
Maybe they were laminated, which might
laminated so it's a veneer. It's a veneer that is on the key.
Oh.
And if you didn't have that lip, then you'd see the seam, and that would look weird.
James, this is the second time I've called you in 18 years, and I promise not to darken your door again, because I made myself look like a fool.
You have not. No, hey, it's just two craftsmen chewing the fat, Reece. That's all it is. But do you think that answer? I think that answer works. I can't see what else it would be.
It's good, actually. It's strong. I don't know who.
Well, I'm going to give myself a round of applause, but I'll leave the back door open in case someone can come in with even more information. But don't you dare not ring me again. Twice in 18 years. I shall expect to hear from you in 2032, 2033. Don't say that, mate. Seriously, it's bad enough. Round of applause for me, please. Thank you. Thank you, Keith. I like that question, actually, but I think it must be right. What we really want is someone who makes pianos, but there's not as many of them around anymore. Stephen is in Truro in Cornwall. Stephen, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on.
Difference between a boat and a ship.
Yes.
Right, so what they used to say was the phrase, you can put a boat on a ship, but you can't put a ship on a boat.
Okay.
And that worked for the longest time, but unfortunately now you have those massive salvage ships, which can put other container ships on top of them and carry them all around the globe. So that definition doesn't work anymore. So the official definition now is a boat leans into a turn, where a ship leans out of a turn.
And that's decided by size?
It's size and design and
how do you lean out of a turn?
If you look at a picture of a ship turning, a big warship or a ferry, you'll see it's leaning out of the turn, out of the circle of where it's turning. And a boat or a sailboat, like a yacht, you watch the mast leaning in the direction that it's turning.
Okay.
So it's leaning into the turn. The only exception is submarines.
I was going to say submarines are boats, aren't they?
Yeah, always boats, yeah.
What is a yacht a boat or a ship?
Right, so now you're getting into categories of subcategories. It's like saying
my favourite place.
An estate is a type of car. So a yacht is a type of boat.
Right.
Because you have sailing boats, powered boats.
So historically, you can put a boat on a ship, but you can't put a ship on a boat. The sheer size of some modern vessels has driven a coach and horses through that definition, although it still largely works. So now, leaning out is a ship, leaning in is a boat. I can't see what you're describing, but
if you look at a picture online of a ship, look at a big ship turning, you'll see it's leaning out of. In the opposite direction that it's turning, the boat leans into the turn. Like if you can imagine, if you're leaning into the turn when you're driving.
Because of the diameter of the turning circle.
Yes, so leaning. If you lean into the turn, you're leaning in the direction you're going. Leaning out. It's the same thing.
Not supposed to Google stuff during Mystery Hour, but I'm in charge. Who'd have thought that big ships turning was such a niche area of interest for so many people on the internet?
Well, you look at the huge Bush class carriers in America doing a right angle turn on a penny. It's impressive.
No, I mean, that's my afternoon sorted. I'll tell you that for nothing. That's me. I'm going all in on that. Qualifications?
10 years in the Royal Navy.
Yeah, nicely done. Round of applause for Stephen. It is 12:30, and Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:33 is the time. Alliteration. Why is it so lovely? This is good. I like this from Pearson. A curious collection of coherent consonants continuously. That's my second favourite alliteration that's been sent in, because this is more topical from Ollie. A curious congregation of cunning conservatives in corals. Brackets, other bookmakers are available. Close brackets. So why is alliteration so satisfying to the human ear or the human tongue? At what point does hitting water from a great height have the same effect as hitting ground from a great height? Stephen has sorted out our boat question. When does going round a roundabout again and again and again ever become an offence? At what point does it become a potential offence? I like this from James. He says, my uncle got done for going around too many times back in the 70s. Which is an extraordinary bit of family folklore to have at your fingertips, James, but it suggests that there is an offence. We just need to go definitive on that one. How much does storing all the emails involve, financially or in terms of energy? And, I did the piano keys one. Quite a few people suggesting it's to stop them sticking as well, but at the moment I prefer my answer, unless we actually speak to a piano maker. Steve is in Oxford. Steve, question or answer?
Hello, James. Love the show.
Thank you, Steve.
So it's a question.
Yeah.
So I've been suffering from hay fever really badly for the last couple of weeks.
Ugh.
And
it's very bad today.
Yeah, no, it is. It's been awful. But the thing is, when I go to bed at night, I sleep all the way through, have a sound night's sleep, and then wake up in the morning. Then 5 or 10 minutes later, you start sneezing again. So why don't I suffer from hay fever when I'm asleep?
I think, oddly, I know this. I think we've had it before. It's to do with the temperature.
Right, okay.
Because at night it's colder, so the pollen is sort of falls to the ground, as it were. It doesn't lift it. It doesn't lift it up, which means you're less likely to breathe it in.
Yeah, it's just we're kind of waking up and start sneezing 5 minutes later.
Yeah, because it's warm again. The sun's up. You wake up when the sun comes up. When the sun goes down, the air cools down, I get that bit. So the pollen falls with the air, but when you've woken up, the pollen has also woken up effectively, and as soon as you start breathing again, the pollen starts affecting you again. Like breathing, you breathe differently in day and night, but that's the fundamental thing that's going on.
Right. Okay.
You don't sound convinced.
No, I'm not totally.
Well, you flipping well should be. I'll give you a fancy name for it, shall I?
Right, okay.
Pollen shower phenomenon.
Right, okay.
It's the pollen shower phenomenon.
5 minutes later, 5 minutes before, I'm not sneezing. And
but I mean, you're working up to a sneeze. If you stayed in bed until lunchtime, you'd be sneezing in bed. It's just because the gap between the sun coming up, the room warming up enough for the pollen shower phenomenon to start moving upwards again instead of downwards is the reason why you're getting affected by it more when you've warmed up, when everything's warmed up a bit. So it's not going to happen immediately. It's not like you flick a switch.
So if I woke up half an hour earlier, it wouldn't happen for half an hour.
Yeah, if all the temperatures were all the same.
Right. Okay.
I don't know that last bit. I've reached the extent of my hay fever related knowledge, Steve.
Right. Okay.
But that is why it's to do with the temperature.
Right. Okay.
And also, as Neil points out, flowers close at night. But it's grass pollen. Everyone thinks pollen's to do with flowers. It's grass pollen is about 95% of the...
isn't it grass and trees?
Yeah, but it's grass and trees, but especially grass. It's grass is the problem, and there's not a lot you can do about that. But except that everything closes at night, except Sainsbury's.
Yeah.
But all the flowers close, so there's less pollen in the atmosphere.
Okay.
I'm taking this one, mate. I know you don't think I deserve it, but you're not. There is no better answer out there.
Right. Okay.
Well, can you sound a bit more enthusiastic?
Not really, no.
Well, what do you mean not?
I should go out to the public, to be honest.
Well, are you serious? It's a pollen shower phenomenon. All right, I'll leave it. Okay, I know. No. I'll do it. I'll put it out there. That's fine, Steve. Don't you worry. Why does Steve's hay fever not affect him as much at night as it does in the day, or indeed at all? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Mark's in Tamworth. Mark, question or answer?
It's an answer, James, to the roundabout question.
Right.
And
whoa. Hold up a second. Big pressure here, Mark.
Yep, okay.
Because this is a motoring question that got through somehow when I've had a ban on motoring questions since Mystery Hour was invented.
No, I was surprised.
But not only did it get through, before I remembered my decades-long ban on motoring questions, I was really, really interested in this question. So if the answer lives up to the question, this could be a moment of almost unprecedented self-reflection for me, Mark.
Okay, right, I'll try my best then.
Let's go.
Okay, right, here we go then. Right, as long as the driving around the roundabout is to the minimum required standard, which is test standard, you can effectively go around as many times as you want without committing an offence.
Right.
There is a caveat to this, in that if you try it on a mini roundabout, where you effectively block anybody from entering or exiting the roundabout as a result, you would commit an offence. The offence being committed would be Section 3 Road Traffic Act, careless and inconsiderate driving, in that you bar anybody from entering or exiting the roundabout. But on a bigger roundabout, where that effect wouldn't take place, like a normal-sized roundabout, you can, like I said, you could
go around all day
into the lane.
What is test standard then, as long as you're changing lanes correctly?
Yeah, as long as you're not adhering to the speed limit and you're changing lanes correctly with the correct signals. But if you pop yourself in the lane innermost to the roundabout, next to the roundabout, with the right-hand signal on, you could effectively go round there all day without interfering with anybody else until you got bored. So if it was your idea of a pleasure drive, you could effectively do that. It's only when your standard of driving slipped below that expected of a safe and competent driver, below test standard, that the offence will be committed if you didn't signal properly or tried to exit from the wrong lane.
So James is misremembering his uncle getting done for it in the 70s then? There's no...
he either came across a traffic cop that he annoyed for some other reason, or the standard of his driving slipped below that expected of a safe and competent driver, which is test standard.
So, no, you've got
because it's just a stretch of road. It's just a stretch of road.
You can see why people thought there might be different rules. But actually, now that you've explained it, I see the problem now is that the answer is brilliant, but it's quite dull.
All traffic law is dull, James. That's why I did it for a living.
That's a great comeback. What a great comeback. And indeed, you set me up for this question. What are your qualifications?
I was a traffic cop for 25 years, specialising in standard of driving offences.
And what's the most number of times you ever saw someone going round a roundabout?
It's probably myself, actually, because it's something we used to do when we used to sit up for stolen cars or cars of interest. If you didn't want to sit out and like the stationary car, because unmarked police cars look like unmarked police cars, especially traffic cars, is you just keep them going around the roundabout until the subject vehicle comes onto the roundabout, and then you just pick it up that way, and that way they don't think anything of you. You don't stick out.
I love it when that happens, because that was a silly question. But it got an absolutely brilliant answer. An absolutely fascinating answer. Mark, you're a star. Have one of these.
I've been around dozens of times.
Waiting for a stolen car. Top man. Mark, thank you. And there it is. A motoring question that was enjoyable at every turn, if you pardon the pun. At every single step. Oh, crikey, that's something that hasn't happened before. 12:42 is the time. Anthony's in Southampton. Anthony, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on.
It's the question about storage and their cost in the data centres.
Go on then.
Okay, so storage is already pre-built and predetermined beforehand by any big company.
Yeah.
I won't go into names, but obviously the data centres are pre-built, the storage is already there, and each individual email that comes through subsequently doesn't take any more cost anymore. It's already storage that's pre-built and held in a data centre across the UK.
So it's finite then? So it could run out? It could be full.
It could. Yeah, yes, technically it could, but they're upgradable, they're hot swappable. The storage can be expanded.
So you can constantly expand it.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. You can. They will know when their storage is running low, and they will upgrade accordingly.
And so, what can we quantify in terms of energy usage or cost? Even though it's predetermined, it still has a cost and a usage.
Yeah. They like the colleague caller mentioned, they do cost quite a lot to run. Data centers are massive, but they save on-site storage for smaller companies now. So, yes, they are very expensive, but individual emails aren't costing any more because of those areas are already predetermined.
So how much would it? How much if I needed? I want to buy a facility, a data center, with enough capacity to save 1 million emails. A billion emails. How much would that cost?
It's a very hard one to quantify. The email size is what dictates that. How big an email you're talking about?
What are your qualifications?
I'm a data center engineer. I'm now a field engineer working in data centers across the UK.
And how much? I can't get the question right, can I? So we don't know, is what you're telling us, because emails are all. It's like asking how many lions can you keep in a zoo.
Yeah, you can't
really
say.
No, it's not. It's like saying how many animals can you keep in a zoo, and then forgetting that you've got chinchillas and elephants.
Yeah, that's not a bad way of describing it, really.
I think it's a brilliant way of It's a brilliant way of describing it.
It's a unique way of describing it. Yeah, I'll give you that.
So you visit the servers. You go to the data centers.
Yeah, they're more storage now. I mean, like you caller mentioned,
what are
they? Hot aisles.
What do they look
like? Big libraries. Have you ever seen this cabinet in a server, like a comms room or a server room?
Yeah, we've got one upstairs or downstairs.
Imagine a library full of those, and there's one aisle's hot, one aisle's cold. They're massive places and all very cool. So the cold aisle draws in all the cold air from the front, exhausts it at the back in the hot aisle. And that's separated aisles.
And are they just in normal places, like normal industrial parks, or are they kept secret?
They're kind of more hidden around, the more bigger ones. They're hidden. Most people don't really advertise where they are normally.
But not for just because there's no point advertising it, or because they're worried about security.
Security is a big concept. Trying to get into them, getting access. They're very, very top secure areas. They hold sometimes government data. It's all the top information that's held in these buildings.
Well, you live and learn. And you've told us what your qualifications are.
I have, yes.
So you get one of these. Thank you, Anthony. That's amazing. No, do you know what? I'm not going to say it until... there's something I need to say, but I'm not going to say it until it then would be too late for you to ring in and be hilarious by saying it. But because I've now decided to postpone saying it, I'm going to forget to say it, which means you'll never know what I'm currently talking about.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:49. We still need to know about alliteration, about the point at which hitting water is as painful or impactful as hitting a solid mass, depending on how high you've fallen from. We've done the roundabouts, we've done the email storage, and the pollen question, which I felt I'd answered, but Steve was, I thought, quite rude, really, and not prepared to accept my answer. Andy is in Basingstoke. Andy, question or answer?
It's a question, mate, and just to prove that I've been paying attention all week. beagles.
What is beagling?
Apparently, some posh schools have beagles, and they do beagling. But no one knows what beagling is.
This is the thing I thought I was going to forget to say. I was talking about just before the last junction, and I said I need to say it, but I don't want to say it in time to let anyone. I don't want any clever clogs ringing in asking the question. But here you are.
Yeah, so I am.
I like it. So here's the thing: they're not foxhounds. They are different. They are beagles. And some lads on Saturdays at my school would go beagling, and no one else knew what that meant. I mean, I presume it involves chasing animals of some description. Do you?
Well, yeah, I was just taking them out for a nice walk in the car.
It could be that. It could be that. It might just, but then it seems odd to give it a name, to call it beagling, as opposed to... So that is it. What is beagling? 0345 6... You don't really care, do you?
No, I just thought it's funny.
No, it is. And I care. I'd actually quite like to know the answer to that question. 0345 6060 973. What is beagling? And how many schools actually have a beagle? But I mean, remember, we're going back 35 years now. It may not exist anymore. It may have sort of gone the way of many other things that were popular 35 years ago. But if you know the answer to the question, there's a Mystery Hour round of applause up for grabs. And there's a Mystery Hour board game that needs to be dished out in the next 8 minutes. I'm just looking at my list. I mean, have we ever given a Mystery Hour board game to a motoring related question or answer? Oh my days. We could be moving into the underneath, into the upside down. Helen is in Tunbridge Wells. Helen, question or answer?
Hello, James. Lovely to speak to you again.
Likewise.
It's an answer, but just before I give my answer, I need to say a big thank you to you.
Why?
A year ago, I got hooked onto your podcast and your Full Disclosure, and it's kept me company with a year's worth of doing 10,000 steps a day.
Oh, how lovely.
3.5 stone less later.
No.
You've changed my life.
Well, so I am the Ozempic of radio presenters, except chemical free.
I've listened to every single episode, and I've run out now. I've caught up with you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can still only do one a week. Do you have any favourites?
Oh, gosh. Dawn French, loved. Miriam Margoyles.
Yes.
Actually, Keir Starmer's was brilliant. Just so many.
It's a lovely collection. Thank you, Helen. What a lovely thing to say. I mean, I wish I could do more now to help you keep it up. But there are lots of other brilliant podcasts around.
Totally. It's been brilliant. Anyway, going back to the answer.
Yes.
It's to the question about alliteration.
Yes.
And I love it. I love the whole concept of it. It kind of stems back right to the day when we're first learning to speak. And as young babies and toddlers learn to speak, we love babbling, and we love babbling with the same sounds.
Gaga goo goo.
Exactly that, and baba and mama and mimi. And the reason is because our mouth and our brain doesn't have to work quite so hard to do that. We've got everything in place set up, so that repetition of sounds means not quite so much has to happen. And so it flows, and it's much more natural. It's the same principle that we like rhyme as well, whether it's hocus pocus and hubble bubble. And we've not got to think quite so much, and it's not quite so much effort involved. So it's just a real natural, flowing, sort of almost poetic movement. And so it sounds pleasant, and it's easy to do.
What a beautiful answer.
Oh, thank you.
What are your qualifications?
I'm a speech and language therapist, so I love it.
Came up in your studies? I mean, it literally gets...
Kind of. I mean, certainly that kind of development of babble and the importance of it, and that kind of playfulness with sounds, yes.
I love this.
But I've kind of applied logic to why we then, be drawn to alliteration.
Why does the podcast lend itself more to your daily exercises than the radio show does?
Obviously, I listen to the radio show as well.
I know. I'm just curious.
I don't know. I think it was just the mixture of it. What's going to be next? And also that kind of 5K walk is a good sort of one episode.
Yeah, and you get into it. It becomes part of the routine, doesn't it? And then you're
100%,
laughing. Oh, lovely stuff. Well, you get one of these.
Yay!
That's a lovely answer. And it makes perfect, that idea of it just being less taxing somehow, subconsciously less taxing. Thank you, Helen. Lee's in Belfast. Lee, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on.
So it's about water.
Yeah.
And so there's no one universal speed at which water becomes like concrete. It's more to do with the speed and the area that hits it.
Yeah.
It's probably the simplest way to think about it is a normal dive versus a belly flop.
That's what I tried to say. I tried to say that with fingertips. I said if you hit the water with your fingertips, you sort of go in like a knife or like a spear. And you could be going faster than someone who hits the water, or something that hits the water like a sort of like a door, like a flat door, couldn't you? So dive versus belly flop are going to have two completely different outcomes.
Yeah, and water has quite strong bonds in it. It's quite hard to break water, actually. That's what, well, compared to other fluids.
Okay.
That's why it has that soreness. It has things called hydrogen bonds.
Yes.
And when you come in contact with the water, with a huge area, you're trying to break a lot of those bonds. And if you know Newton's laws of physics, the third one says every action has an equal but opposite reaction.
Yes.
So the force of you breaking those has the equivalent force of you breaking you, essentially. So if you're trying to break that, essentially the amount of damage you're doing to the water trying to displace it, because it takes a lot of force to break this and cause the water to displace, that force has come back to you as well.
Well, I mean, it's a fantastic answer, isn't it? But also not an answer. I mean, so there is no constant answer to the question. But
if it's kind of like a question that's missing parts, you would need to know not only the speed but also the area of the thing.
The amount of object hitting water, the spread, the surface area hitting the water at that time. Qualifications?
I did transport phenomena, fluids, and fluid flow for 2 years as part of my master's.
Beautiful stuff.
Thanks very much.
No, thank you. This is amazing. Sarah's in Hadley. Sarah, question or answer?
Answer, please.
Carry on.
Beagling is chasing hares across country on foot with hounds, but you don't ride horses.
And are the hounds different from foxhounds?
Yes, they've got shorter legs, smaller bodies, and sometimes you see people having them as pets, but not many.
What's the history? Where does it come from? Is it like a slightly poorer man's version of hunting?
I don't know. I suppose it was when the country was overrun by hares.
The hares, and that's what you go for, the hares.
Yeah.
It's all for hares, specifically hares.
My dad went to private school and he set up a pack of beagles.
At his school?
At his school.
Where did he go?
He went to a school called Radley near Oxford.
Because they had a pack of beagles at my... So what was your dad's interest in it then, that he'd actually set up a pack of beagles?
I think 3 of them did. They were country boys and they just got permission to do it, and they enjoyed it, and I think it was really popular. I suppose they took the beagles home in the holidays.
Is it still there? Do they still have a beagle pack at Radley?
They have until quite recently. I don't know whether they do now, but they have until relatively recently.
And those are your qualifications. What a beautiful answer.
There you go.
Did you ever go beagling with him?
No, because I'm far too lazy.
Yes, I don't think I ever fancied it either, to be honest with you.
I just watched them. If you stand on the hill, you can watch them going round and round.
That's lovely, thank you. How old am I now? 52. I left school when I was 18. Yeah. I've never known since 1985 when I went to school and they said, would you like to join the Beagling Society? And I said, no, thank you. I've only now found out what that would have involved. And like you, Sarah, I'm delighted with my decision.
Well, there you are. Okay.
Round of applause for Sarah.
Thanks.
Thank you. And finally, Jonathan is in Bishop Stortford. Jonathan, question or answer?
Oh, yes. Good afternoon, James. Yes, the official reason that you've got a lip on the front of each key on a piano is twofold. First of all, to enable you to lift a sticking key easily.
Of course you can, yeah. It gives you purchase.
And also, the other main reason is that the lip is a slight extension to the key for people with a larger size hand than the average.
So it just increases. So my answer was completely wrong. Qualifications?
Musical family. Grandmother was a concert pianist, and my son-in-law's a well-known musician.
Fantastic. I mean, that's not really a qualification for knowing about the anatomy of a piano keyboard, but yes, that's the qualification. We've talked about it, and the bit that means you can lift it up. That's a penny drop moment. That makes you go, oh yeah, God, absolutely. Round of applause for Jonathan. So we've done the beagling. Didn't do the pop. Well, we did do the pollen. We've done everything there. So it's. Can we check on this one whether or not? Because I think that she has been on before, in the answer to the alliteration question. Was it Helen? If Helen's already got one, then we'll give it to Barry. But if Helen hasn't already got one, then we'll give it to Helen. That's it. And that if Helen's already got one, then we will be making the first ever Mr. Board Game Award to a motoring-based questioner. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, the official LBC app, where you can also pause and rewind live radio. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.